morning, good morning, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Dragon's Breath Bow Wow, welcoming you back to our first episode of Archon's artwork. Today we have a pretty long stream. This is going to be about 2 hours roughly, maybe an hour and a half if we reach the end in a decent enough time. We are welcoming in all of our folks now, so I will leave from this slide in about 5 minutes as we say hello to folks. I have some special guests coming in, a whole lot of heavily anticipated art, of course, coming in, and we will have some time at the very end of this section for a Q&A. Now, for those of you who are watching us via YouTube, essentially simulcast via the recording, you have plenty of time to get in on this live stream. We will have another live stream for the part 2 with all of the finished art in addition to a whole bunch of other artists who have helped us out on this channel in a couple of days, maybe even a week or so. So you're going to have plenty of time for that, and you are all welcome to that as well. There'll be many advance notices as to when that is. So, as I mentioned, this is an artwork and lore portion, so a lot of this is going to be teeing up some of the stuff that we'll be talking about in the channel in future. Some theology, some history, a lot of 40k chaos stuff in general. But most specifically, we'll be talking about the Archon himself, about Archon Nadzibar, or Archon Nadzibar. We'll be talking about his history, the view of the Sabbat Worlds Crusade and the control of the Imperium from the view of the Sanguinary Worlds, which is my home, and then various pieces of art leading up to the part 2, where we'll show all the finished art and all of the extra details in addition to that. There will also be some honorable mentions, and we'll go over some existing lore and artwork. But I'm only going to really get started on that in about 20 to 30 minutes as we give people plenty of time to come into the chat. So if you are watching us via the simulcast or via recordings or anything like that, feel free to just skip 10 to 15, 20 minutes ahead until I get to the next page, which is going to be blank white. So you'll be able to see the difference between those. In the meantime, hey Wallflower, how's it going? Glad to see somebody here, and I expect at least 4 or 5 people to come in because this is a pretty big stream, and I have a lot of artwork to show off. And of course, we have a Q&A at the end. So it's going to be nice to have people here for the Q&A. And I know people are just getting off work. It is that time, but I'm also aware that plenty of people are fans who live on the other side of the world, which, honestly, I was very surprised by how many of you there actually were. We have Australians, Germans, of course Brits, as usual, and then a couple of other individuals who I recognized from being even further afield than that. I don't know if you get further afield than Australia, but I'm sure there are some. And I know we also have a New Zealander here, so it's so nice to see everyone coming from everywhere. And it's really nice to see that people actually want to tune into this kind of stuff, even if it is just live streams and videos. Speaking of which, this is a kind of opening to our 500 subscriber drive and special. Initially, I was going to wait about a month or two, upload some more videos, and wait for us to actually hit that number. But I decided, since all of the artwork was getting so long in the tooth and so many people were very interested in getting it done and seeing what we had produced as the first art to ever be done of these characters, well, I just couldn't help myself, and I really wanted to show it to all of you guys as quickly as I could. However, due to some artists being a little bit slower on their commissions, I had to split this one up into a 2-parter. So there'll be plenty of art, there'll be plenty of details on it, and of course I've added in that extra lore element for those of you who are just here to listen along and learn some stuff. Also, yeah, that guard regiment is pretty cool. I like that whole 1800s American explorer idea. For an Imperial Guard regiment, I often think of the older militaries as giving us some PDFs often. Matter of fact, a lot of the time you could see things like the Ottoman Turkish Empire. A lot of their like Janissary foot soldiers could act pretty well as both PDF. And then of course there are the actual Maccabean Janissaries, which take that same name. But honestly, there's a massive difference between the Maccabean Janissaries and the Janissaries of history. Mainly in their tactics. Obviously, the Janissaries of history had no real need or urgency to have a lot of body armor on them. At certain points, they had some body armor, but at the time when they were organized enough to have firearms in the true days of the Ottoman Empire, uh, they were just a much more disciplined infantry unit. So, with that said, I also have to point out that this is going to be one of those first videos where I have to go into some lore that is a little bit, let's not say non-canon, let's just say a little more complex in its origin story. And don't worry, I will elucidate where I am squeezing the little details that we have to get some juice out of them. But don't worry, I am absolutely confident and will stand behind any of the lore things that I say in at least this video. I am very, very much looking forward to playing this character in the YouTube setting and essentially having it be my caricature or my pseudonym for the 40k stuff. And don't worry, this is not any indication of like pauses or breaks in the content. There will be more. Obviously, the first thing is going to be we're going to be doing very long streams in the future, probably 3 or 4 by the time that we're done. One of the biggest ones, just as a housekeeping thing, other than the part 2 of this, is going to be a video where I help or I work with you guys on creating some things, creating some content. We're going to work on the fighting styles and some critiques of all of the original legions and of the Primarchs. So we're essentially going to go through as a group for however long it takes, and we're going to go legion by legion, Primarch by Primarch, researching their weapons and gear, and then having some nice color commentary on positives and negatives, and we can have a good discussion about that in terms of who's better at what. We'll also be including first captains in that, obviously, and any other important named heroes. For example, Lucius isn't a captain, but Lucius will be included. Karn, obviously, is a captain, so he'll be included. Sevatar, all those folks, yes. But we might also go into other individuals who are a little bit less important. For example, we might go into the Painted Count, for the Night Lords. For the Imperial Fists, we will probably go into some characters that are dead by a certain period of time, but we'll still be analyzing them. Yeah. So I think that's enough time for the start of this. Let's go into the actual point of this stream, which is really the big thank you. And I have to say thank you a lot of times in this video because it has been a massive, complicated group effort for all of the people in all of the places to get all the things in this video ready to go. So, I have to say thank you first to all of you guys. The first thing I have to say is that this channel is almost 9 years old. But in terms of like actual content that was of any value, it's really only a couple of months old. And the fact that we've done so well, we've shot up so many, not only subscribers, but views. I get thousands of views every month, which is an absolute shock to me. If anyone has been around since the very long back time when I was still doing like a lot of video gaming content and stuff, you'll know that I was pretty much getting 1 or 2 views a video, and that was mostly my own watching my stuff. That was a combination of just being technologically inept and also playing games that I wasn't very good at. Again, in future, I'll probably do some type of gaming stream or maybe something like that. We've already done some gaming streams, but that's going to be something that we will look into in future. But this change over the last couple of months, if I remember right, the first time that we uploaded a video was just in time for the new year. I think January or December, one of those, we had uploaded our first few videos, and it was pretty much just getting stuff off of my chest, 100%. Hey, buddy, welcome back. Glad to see you, my friend. But yeah, the Lasgun video was almost 100% just getting things off of my chest that I had to say in public so that people would, you know, maybe learn a little bit about the weaponry and technology of the 41st millennium, because among all things, the Lasgun has some of the most disingenuous lore, along with having some of the most rabid fan base. And that's one of the things that I really disliked about certain 40k lore, was that there was a terrible combination between things being portrayed as far more powerful than they would actually be in real life, or far more good at their job than they would actually be in real life, while at the same time being this meme where they're just bad at everything and they have such obvious flaws and weaknesses. So there were people who liked some things and would put them on this insane pedestal that didn't make any logical sense, or logical consistency. And then there would be the exact opposite, where people would be haters on a certain faction or group or whatever it would be, and they would just absolutely throw them into the gutter and treat them as if they had no value or agency in the world. And I think what my goal with the lasgun video was not necessarily even to just logic out the weapons systems and to make it easy for people to understand and analyze. It was also just to point out that there are middle grounds that we as a community can come to, and also that those middle grounds are the point of why we exist. You know, as fans, we aren't meant to just mindlessly consume content. You're not designed as a human being to look uncritically at things that you enjoy. And and there's a lot of reasons for that. Obviously, the first one is if you are not critical of content, you will inherently be attracted to absolute slop. For example, there are good movies and there are bad movies. Why do more people watch good movies than they do bad movies? And you might say, well, what about popular movies? What about pop movies? It doesn't have to be a cinematic masterpiece for it to be good. And that's the other thing. People who are obsessed with grim dark in the 41st millennium will look at anything fun or anything incredible or anything powerful, and they will immediately discount it or dislike it or feel like they're against it just because it is not fitting that venue or that genre. Things can be sensational, they can be incredible, and still be grimdark. And there are great examples of that, and I think that might be a generational thing. Not to be unkind to any of the old heads, of course, I think we share a lot of our opinions when it comes to the new 40K, but to take it the way that I take it, to go and say that I will not cover anything or I will not focus on anything after essentially Millennium 40 or Millennium 41, I think that's where I kind of diverge from a lot of the modern YouTubers. And that's where the Lasgun video really came from, was I want to talk about how can we merge this extremism and this minimization of technology into something that makes logical sense. Yeah, y'all are both in contenders. So, with that said, my first thank you then has to be to you guys. Because I really did not think anyone was going to watch any of the videos when they first came out. And I have to say, I was so surprised when first the lasgun video, then the autocannon video, then the PDF video, they just did numbers after numbers after numbers. They still are my highest grossing videos. And I know, with time, things always get higher in views, but really, really, the fact that so many people actually wanted to watch, and they reached incredibly high speeds of views and likes and comments at days instead of weeks instead of months, that I was really blown off my feet. And I kind of realized at that moment that even with my bad setup, even with my confusion as to how to do YouTube correctly, even without any of that knowledge of the meta on the system, I was just going to keep going. And I think that has come to a point now where I'm ready to do this a little bit more professionally. Not like I'm gonna start shilling out for ads or putting on YouTube ads or anything like that. I never intend to make money from this. My goal is just to give you guys the content that you want in such a way that I will always retain some level of middle ground for the fandom as a whole. Now again, do I appeal to the fandom as a whole? No, that's obvious. Nobody does. But I'm trying to be somewhere between the slop tubers, who will chase the most current book for comments, quotes, and excerpts, read them uncritically, and then make sensational claims in order to get people to click on their video, and between the old head lore tubers, who effectively read through a bunch of books and then present very long literary essays summarizing those things without any critical or specific comparison. So, let's get to the second person that I have to thank, who's the individual who just joined our chat. Moritz Bludow was the first artist who returned my call for a commission. They were the first person who willingly met up and decided that we could set up a deal, an agreement for our arrangement. And among all of the artists who deserve appreciation, I really have to say that basically nobody did as good of a job, in my opinion, and provided me with so much work. Genuinely, I have a folder of over like 46 different files that Moritz here, who is now in our chat, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it. I know it's late over there, but thank you for coming. Nobody gave me that much material or that much progress or was more responsive and willing to work with me when it came to edits. This is a person who literally asked me to go through all of the lore for the character before they even started making any of the second generation of the art. And I'm not sure if anybody can understand or articulate how important it is to me that the person who gave us the first canonical art of Nadzibar was a fan and genuinely knew what was going on and why we were doing this. So I have to say, even though I know you have to go in a bit, thank you so much, Moritz. I really had such a good time joining up with you to do this. And even though I got another 15 minutes before I go on to your art, I know that you'll watch this, and I'd appreciate it if you let me know if I've interpreted your art correctly, because I think it is some of the most beautiful stuff that I've ever seen produced. So, Moritz is the one who's going to get the most appreciation in this section. And of course, I would recommend anyone to go and get commissions, because not only were they affordable, they were very responsive and incredibly flexible and just unbelievably talented. Unbelievably talented in a perfectly impressive way. And our next ones here are some folks who have gotten in commissions or joined up with us, but I haven't got them right here with us. Moritz was kind enough to actually join us, which I really do appreciate. But the others that we have here are George Earl Abelayan. You'd likely know him from both Instagram artists and from being one of the more professional artists on the platform. I'm still working on getting that commission finished for the part 2, so we're not going to see that just yet, but he will have a large section. The next ones are Artivity, Axis Art, and Isle Morn Art, among others. Artivity gave me a commission during the period where I was taking commissions. It wasn't 40k related, but it was just another great experience with commissions that I'd like to shout out. Axis Art is almost as important as Moritz, to be honest. And equally important to George Earl Abelayan, because Axis Art was the one who gave me the first of my Night Lord artworks, and genuinely one of my absolute favorites. So I had finished a short story, one of a trio called Edge of Night. And as some of you have read it, I know, and I've talked about it before, but Edge of Night was without an artist, was without any detail, but since I was doing it for the Warhammer 40k Big Bash, the kind of anthology series where we all do 40k fanfics and then they give us an artist, Axis Art was my artist for the second one of those that I did. And I have to say, absolutely incredible work. Tons of sketches, extra free art. Did it for free. Didn't have to try that hard. Didn't have to do anything, but for free made 2 incredible artworks that I still use as my phone's background to this day. I see their art every single day. And I would just love to shout them out because they're Axis Art on Instagram and they do an incredible job. The last one is Isle Morn Art. Isle Morn Art did a commission for one of my friends who was doing Corrupt Contenders. We have a lot of art of various Magisters at various points, but one of the ones that we don't have any good artwork of is Sheobal the Red Hand, or Sheobal the Red-Handed. And Isle Morn Art was one of the first, or was the first artist to put Sheobal into a visible format. So for Isle Morn and the other artist who we're talking about, who was also from that 40k Big Bash, we'll go into them in part 2. But with that, special thanks to all, and I know Blue Dow's probably going to have to get going, but let's get right into the lore in just a minute or so. Again, you guys, plenty of time to go in and send it around to friends. I would love to get as much feedback on this as possible, but with that, thank you, out of the way, let's continue. So let's talk about this first commission, this Nadzibar commission, which was so important. Yes, Sheobal finally has art. Alfarius here is the one who Isle Morn Art actually did that commission for. This is the beginning of the triptych idea and Nadzibar's background in Corrupt Contenders. What is a triptych? Well, a triptych is a traditional medieval piece of art, or triptych, or triptych. Triptych is a traditional piece of medieval art that has 2 different types of depictions. There's usually one large central image which is supposed to depict the actual core of the art, what's supposed to be represented. Sometimes it's a traditional piece, something that's a classic image that we might recognize from the Bible or from other references. And then the wings are supposed to represent one of two things. It's either supporting art that is looking towards the center, as this one is, or it's a progression where you have early life, midlife, or prime, and then the end of life. And this is a very common theme within medieval art, the triptych. Not only was it because making larger art pieces was more expensive because you'd have to fill in all this black space with more artwork, but also it meant that you could convey movement, motion, distance, and change with a much smaller piece of artwork that wasn't as expensive. Now, of course, expense wasn't a concern with me, but because I wanted to represent all the portions of Nadzibar's lore and all of his art, I chose to do this type of piece, a triptych with 3 separate images. But let's first talk about the absolute state of the artwork for Nadzibar. Canon art, absolutely 0. There is one, and I repeat, one canonical example of Nadzibar even having artwork in the entirety of 40k. He has no visible art whatsoever. There is no evidence of him existing whatsoever within canonical artwork. If it is, it's like a black and white crap sketch from the back of a book, and it's totally erroneous and irrelevant because it's made from an imperial lens. In terms of actual detail of what he looked like or what he looks like in canon, we also don't really know. There isn't a lot of detail. The only detail that we know is that he does not sport a lot of mutations until the very, very end of his life. And those mutations that he does have at the end of his life seem to be very, very extreme. Basically, he goes from being almost unmutated, not to say uncorrupted, but unmutated, to incredibly mutated in a short period of time. No less dangerous for being incredibly mutated, because he is very, very deadly, especially at the end of his life, but without any canon art of what he looked like, and with only limited art of what his gene line would have looked like, or the Gurin savages from the Sanguinary Worlds would have looked like, we were at essentially a completely blank slate, other than that one description which is on his Lex page of what he looked like at the end of his life. Fanon art, and of course, we always think, well, of course there's going to be fan art of him, right? Somebody's got to be a buddy, right? Somebody has to make some fan art. No. Nadzibar, as of a few months ago, had 0 even fan-made artwork. Now, some of the other Magisters had both canon or fanon artwork, but Nadzibar? Not at all. And why is that? Nadzibar is around in the galaxy for longer than Erlock Gower is, and yet Erlock Gower has both canon and fanon art. He even has models on the tabletop, technically, depending on how you want to interpret things. And nothing, not a single thing. I have spent literally years combing the internet and all these art forums trying to find any type of fan art of Nadzibar, and there simply is none. For somebody who casts such a long history over the Sabbat worlds as a whole, I thought and still think that this is a criminal underutilization of our boy. So what about the art of the Magisters? Is this or that Erlock or Nadzibar? We will get to that on the next page, but I felt and still feel a burning need to correct this injustice, to change this and to make our understanding of, well, me, a little bit better. We know nothing, so I needed something to work off, and as a result, I went to Corrupt Contenders. I have created a RPG or a text RPG system for Warhammer 40k called Corrupt Contenders. It is essentially a cult simulator, or that was originally how it started off, where you would organize and lead a chaos cult after a certain period of time, and it would be set up in such a way that you would have one person running several games at the same time and organizing a lot of people as various named or unnamed Chaos Demagogues. So, of course, the next step to fill out Nadzibar's backstory was to play him in Corrupt Contenders. And that campaign is ongoing, and it has been for almost half a year now. But by the very start of it, I already had enough material to start his artwork. I had been thinking about his design, I had been organizing around his weaponry and his getup and his look, and we came to a couple of things that were based on some of the existing art. So let's look at the existing art really quickly. Now, some of these are official. I make no claim to them because, of course, they are not from this commission. These are just pieces of artwork that we were using as references. So, who do we have here in our existing art? I think two of them are very obvious. One of them here is the classic artwork of Erlock Gower as the Lord of the Blood Pact, his great cornate armor. Obviously, this is not his power armor. We will see him in his power armor at another time. But this is existing, at least semi-canon artwork of Erlock Gower. But Erlock Gower is not Nadzabar, and the same thing here. This central image, this image in the middle here, there are some people who say that this is Nadzabar, or it was supposed to be. I disagree. And here's the reason why I don't think that this is a good representation of Nadzabar. Really, it's because he's not as much of a fighter as he is a priest, and to a degree a diplomat. Most of the people on Gura, most of the people on this feral world who were in charge of society were feral warlords. People like Erlock Gower, people like the Gower who was in charge before Nadzabar was in charge. Those are very strong, brutish creatures that are incredibly violent and quite dangerous. This fits that motif. It does not fit the motif of a highly religious man turned religious crusader. And that's what he is. And of course, we have some other artwork here that is canon as well. We have Nokad the Smiling, and down here, slightly more corrupted Nokad the Blighted. These are likely the same person. We have Herodor Asphodel and Herodor Asphodel's canonic artwork, which I think is very, very close. You've got the nice horned Viking helmet and the same horned Viking helmet here, and his power armor that is mirrored here as well, power armor number 2. We have Rushak Vakim, one of the Vahedwalk pirates, with his Lightning Lord persona. If you're a fan of The Winds of Winter, if you're a fan of Game of Thrones, you'll recognize the Lightning Lord. That is kind of what Rushak Vakim takes off of in a certain way. We have Sholin Skara, a Kithite death cultist, who is clearly very devoted to Khorne. As you can see, he's ground the symbols into his body. We have Anakwanar Sek, back here covering his damaged face with his psychic wings. Our version of Sek that we went with for Corrupt Contenders, since Sek's background is not very fleshed out, we describe him and we play him as a ex-Inquisitor. Essentially, he is an Inquisitor who has visions of the future, that essentially either make him go mad and join the enemy, or he joins the enemy to try and defeat them, and he ends up becoming corrupted. And that's one of the reasons why Sek is so dangerous, because he has this intense, in-depth knowledge of both Chaos and of the Imperium of Man as a whole. He has the lore and skills of both sides, which is reflected here, that kind of robed psychic monster motif. And then the last one here is actually Magister Quull, or Pater Quull. Quooks the Eyeless, who is here. Quooks is a Zechian worshipper of a certain mode. We currently have him on Fortis Binary, trying to undercut one of the Forge Worlds within the Sabbat Worlds Crusade, and he's doing fairly well. But you can see here why he's called the Eyeless. He doesn't have eyes, but he has many eyes. So, classic Zechian follower here. Psychic staff, lots of eyes. We're not really sure about a lot of his backstory. He shows up pretty prominently in the Battle of Balhaut, but beyond that, we're not very sure. But we will learn as Corrupt Contenders continues more about him. So just to say, none of these is Nadzabar. In my opinion, not a single one of these is representative of Nadzabar, and most of them could probably use a little bit of tweaking. Obviously, Nokad the Blighted, Nokad the Smiling, very different. This is probably Nokad at the very, very beginning of his campaign, where he's still mostly a feral world human, and then this is probably him at the end of his life, when he's a lot more corrupted. But let's talk about the lore for a second in more depth. The Sabbat worlds from Nadzabar's perspective. Now, To understand this, we have to understand the history of the Great Crusade. In the 31st millennium, or rather in the 30th millennium, the Imperium of Man had been well established and was expanding its borders daily, essentially increasing in size over time in several different directions. Where were those directions? What places were they going to first? Well, you can kind of tell from the map where they were focused. They were focused in one major direction, that being the global east. Essentially, once they escaped Terra via a northern route, they had the option to go east or west, and they had the option to go east or west, and they ended up going east. And that's why there are so many more populated and organized Imperial worlds out in the eastern side of the Imperium of Man, as opposed to the western side. The Ultima Segmentum versus Segmentum Pacificus are dramatically different in terms of size and population. That doesn't mean that no expansion was going on. Of course, we have the Coreward sectors, the Lana Rifts, and all of these areas in the south that were colonized, but you will notice that there are certain clustered areas in which there are very few canon worlds in Segmentum Pacificus, especially on the far western edge. Now, why is this? Well, number one, there is a massive reason to not expand very far to the west, and that is the Eye of Terror. The Eye of Terror not only made warp translation quite difficult, but it also made it very difficult and rather daunting to try and move a lot of things and survive with human beings out nearby it. So during the Great Crusade, there was a much larger push eastward, and they ranged farther afield eastward than they did to the west. And for that reason, the Sabbat worlds, down here in the far southeast, did not receive a lot of attention during the Great Crusades. Now, there were visitors, and of course there were Mechanicus forces that went out and sent their various probes and their explorator fleets out there, but they never really set up shop until a couple thousand years later. Now, what happened a couple thousand years later? After the Horus Heresy, after all the nightmares of the plagues of unbelief and the Cardinal being in charge of the Imperium, after all that nightmare had died down, well, the Imperium was on the expand again. We're finally pulling in one direction with the new Terran leadership, and we're reorganizing a much larger, more cohesive empire. And that means that we have to organize to get rid of some dangerous elements. What are those dangerous elements? Well, the first one is the Sabbat worlds. Why are the Sabbat worlds so dangerous? Well, they've been left alone for a long time, and they are full of chaos worshippers and aliens. The Xenos Chaos Empire of the Sabbat worlds. Now, at the time, the Sabbat worlds were not unified. There was not one overarching chaotic government, but there were rather several semi-nomadic chaos empires within the Sabbat worlds. The strongest, and to a degree the most long-lived of these, came out of the Sanguinary worlds. The Sanguinary worlds are Nadzibar's home turf, essentially. They are his backyard. They are called the Sanguinary worlds because of a significant warp phenomena, currently unknown as to where it originates from, but it originates from the west. But this warp phenomena literally colors a certain portion of the empty space around these worlds, in addition to their oxygen, a pretty harsh color of dark red. And as a result, when seen from above or when looking up at the sky, it could be seen that most things were kind of colored or painted with this reddish color on the western side of that sector, or subsector rather. And as a result, they gained the name of the Sanguinary Worlds. The Sanguinary Worlds were one of the most powerful Imperial players in this game, but they were certainly not the only ones. There were plenty of Xenos factions like the Grell, who had human slaves and had entire worlds just themselves, and they were setting up a pretty darn good chaos-worshipping or chaos-allied empire, and weren't really doing much other than fighting amongst themselves on occasion and expanding their control of the Sabbat worlds. Now, there were planets that were free of the taint of chaos at this time, but they were not many, and many of them were defending themselves from chaos. So what happens? The Imperium organizes a crusade, and Around the heart of it, or at the heart of it rather, is the leader of the crusade, Saint Sabbat. Now, most of this comes down to Nadzibar in his own head from long ago histories of long dead fathers of fathers of fathers, because, of course, by the time of the Sanguinary Worlds campaign, in Millennium 36 and afterward, there are significant issues with the interference of time. You can't expect a human being who lives for only 100 years, or a couple of hundred years in the terms of Chaos-allied individuals, you can't expect them to remember something that happened during the era of the Great Crusade. However, Nadzibar does have an image of what happened to this relatively chaos-neutral empire that used to engulf their planet and really informed their way of life. The Saint is essentially seen as divine retribution, furious hatred, genocide, effectively, because her and her angels, in this case the White Scars chapter, her and her angels scoured the Sabbat worlds with a massive force of an Imperial Crusade behind them. And this enormous force claimed all of the Sanguinary worlds in a relatively short amount of time because it was led by a genuine Imperial Saint who managed to last for a long enough time to enter the Sanguinary worlds and destroy several planets that were at that point being held by a concerted, combined effort of Xenos, Chaos, and various hybrid Empire remnants that had fled from the rest of the Sabbat worlds. Effectively, her entrance into the sector that now bears her name spelled the death knell for this massive civilization that is still to this day the largest self-contained Chaos Empire, completely engulfing almost an entire sector with various Chaos-allied groups in the history of the 41st millennium. Essentially, at no other time in the history of this entire lore has Chaos held onto so much territory for such a long time. And for this reason, it really has to be viewed as a proto-Chaos empire. They're not Chaos in the way that we think of Chaos Space Marines, or even in the way that we think of the Eye of Terror. They are primeval Chaos. They are the primordial truth. They're an era much like the Wordbearers, or much like the Colchizians, or those on original Cadia, who viewed the warp in a more elemental and spiritual way. And through that lens is how Nadzibar sees the coming of the Saint. He sees her as quite literally a greater demon of the Emperor of Mankind. And he views her with that much hatred and disgust for that reason, because the Chaos Gods do not recognize the Emperor, but the Emperor is recognized by the Sanguinary Worlds. Effectively, they saw one of his greater demons come and put an end to their empire in genocidal manner, and the result is that he got added to their pantheon. Essentially, Nadzibar and the rest of the Blood Pact tout that there are not 4 gods, not 1 god, not 2 gods, but 5. There are 5 gods within the warp. One of them is the God Emperor, the Emperor of Mankind. The Emperor of Mankind, in the Chaos understanding of Nadzibar, is really most easy to describe as a deceiver god. Again, he views the angel and the demon that came to destroy their civilization as divine punishment from this deceiver, an individual who sought to undermine and destroy their empire in seeking its own human followers. Essentially, he views the entire Sabbat worlds as duped, deceived, put under the having the wool pulled over their eyes by an evil, deceiving deity, but it is still a deity. And, when we think of Chaos Space Marines and how they view the Emperor, they view him also as a deceiver, but also, he's not a god. He's a pathetic man, nothing but a man, to be scorned and mocked for his false godhood. Your dead god, your false god, death to the false Emperor. To Nadzibar, the God Emperor is not false. He is more true than anything because he sent his demon to come kill us. And we know what it's like to be under the wrath of an angry god, because it was the end of our empire, was the end of our civilization, and it really was genocide, because you have to remember, proto-human empire, that's billions of chaos worshipping individuals, and they had been doing it for generations upon generations. Essentially, since the opening of the eye and the expansion of mankind, there had been chaos worshipping empires in the Sabbat worlds. That's one of the reasons why there's not a lot of mutation amongst these followers. It's because they've been bathed in the chaos of the sanguinary worlds, especially, forever. They're very resistant to the corrupting effects of chaos, and for that reason, they believe in that primordial truth, that ancient idea of mankind and chaos being far more akin than the Imperials do. So an Imperial chaos cultist and a cultist from the sanguinary worlds are going to look at worship very, very differently. Yes, conquered cultures are crushed underfoot. We lost so many great avenues for lore. You're very right, which is also why I'm trying to bring this back. But continuing on, what does that mean for Nadzabar? How does he see the Empire? Well, of course, he does worship all four of the gods, and of course he recognizes the fifth god, the God Emperor, but why is he Chaos Undivided? Of course, he leads, or by proxy, leads the Blood Pact. Aren't the Blood Pact a cult of Khorne? Well, no, they're not. Everyone who tells you that the Blood Pact is a cult of Khorne, even the lore that tells you that the Blood Pact are a cult of Khorne, they're not technically telling you the truth. Again, the lore that says it is saying it in relation to their rituals and in relation to their tradition, but you gotta remember, the sanguinary worlds are going to war. What god do you want to champion in a time, in an era of warfare? It's Khorne. And of course, they are a militant tradition. Even if they worship all 4/5 of the gods equally, in terms of their actual worship, Nadzabar makes it clear as a religious man that worship and warfare are two very different things. Worshipping Khorne on the battlefield, well, why not worship him as actual worshippers? Why not go into the cathedrals, open up churches, temples to his glory, rather than simply fighting in the name of Khorne? Now, of course, they do glorify, justify, and pray to Khorne when they are fighting, because who else are you going to pray to in time of war but the god of war? But then in the backside of things, on the planning side, on the alliance side, they are most decidedly Chaos Undivided. And not the Chaos Undivided of the Black Legion, where they split it up amongst all of them. No, they view Chaos, almost like the Iron Warriors, as a function of humanity, as a tool, if you will, to get things done, and not in the way the Iron Warriors do. The idea from Nadzabar's perspective of chaos is not that human beings use chaos as a tool to enrich themselves, but rather chaos and humanity work together. He describes it as a fiefdom system. Effectively, there are kings in the warp. And matter of fact, the Blood Pact refer to the gods not as gods, but rather as kings. So there are the King of War, the King of Plague, the King of Pleasure, and the King of Sorcery. These kings are the absolute hierarchy maximum. They are gods in every sense of the word, but they are closer to us in terms of hierarchy than a standard Chaos Undivided follower would say. Now, to be a king is to have several things under you, correct? Of course, you have kings, and then you have knights. Who in this scenario... Yes, of course this is chaos propaganda, but this is how it is. Who are the knights in Nadzabar's perspective? Well, the knights are very clear. They're his angels. Knights are angels, and the angels of chaos, of course, are the Chaos Space Marines. Just how Nadzabar refers to loyalist Space Marines as the God Emperor's angels, because, of course, we know that the greater demons are his saints, well, the knights would be his angels. And then what's between the knights and the lord? Well, you have lesser lords, barons and dukes, and friends or sons or family members of the kings. Those are greater demons. A bloodthirster is to Khorne what a baron is to his lord or to his king. And this hierarchy goes further down. What do you have underneath knights? Well, you have men-at-arms. And for Nadzibar, men-at-arms has another very specific term to it. It is individuals who carry weapons and serve in the highest ranks of the Chaos military. Essentially, if you are a warrior, a soldier, a blessed chosen, you are one of the men-at-arms for a Chaos god. Effectively, the direct foot soldiers of a king. And think of it like this. He puts demons as below a man-at-arms. He considers demons to be even below a serf or a yeoman. Yeomen, again, being those free farmers, yeomen in his mind would be chaos preachers, damagowers or paters, individuals who know the faith and go out and preach of their own will, and yet are not truly enlightened or enlisted in the military forces as someone like a pact son would be. A pact son, and of course Nadzibar himself, would be considered a man-at-arms for their king. And then further below that we have serfs. Serfs are the rest of humanity. If you're not serving chaos on the battlefield, serving it in the temple, or serving it as a higher power, a demon or an Astartes, or sorry, a greater demon, a herald or an Astartes, you are a serf. You labor, you work, you worship, you may be called to defend yourself, but you're not expected to. He certainly doesn't treat civilians as worthless playthings to be discarded. He definitely sees them as misguided and to be elevated to the correct worship. But what is below serfs? Of course, serfs are, in our modern day terms, they're not allowed to leave certain areas, they have restrictions. We would call them slaves, but Nadzibar has another class for genuine slaves. Slaves within this hierarchical system are demons. And now this is mostly lesser demons and mindless demons. Nadzibar comes from a culture where chaos is both respected but also let alone by the majority of the population. The average civilian on Gora, or even the average warrior, does not pray directly to the gods. At least they don't traditionally. They would go through a blood priest, traditionally referred to as a Damagower, or eventually referred to as a Damagower, but the Blood Priest is the actual correct term for what Nadzibar actually is at the beginning of his rise to power. Now, these guys act like a bishop or a religious priest for one of these war bands or mini-states on Gora. Again, this feral backwater world, which has the remaining dregs of these old empires that couldn't be gotten to after the saint was slain on Harkalon. We will talk about how the saint died at another time. But after her death and after the end of the campaign, the Sanguinary Worlds were left essentially destroyed. There was only one habitable planet, and it was practically an empty desert with a couple of crashed ships and some tiny structures on it. And that, over thousands of years, would grow up to become Gura, where Nadzibar was born and the Society of the Blood Pact would eventually arise. They were a brotherhood militant. They were a religious order that was also involved in conflict because, of course, this is a feral world where everyone is fighting each other. But they were also chaos worshippers, as a lot of other people on the planet were. So, essentially, his perspective as a blood priest was that he was a direct link, or the direct link, between those worshippers of chaos, those men militant, those warriors, those civilians, and the kings themselves. He viewed himself as the go-between between the heavens, the warp, the demons up there, and here on this mortal plane. And that's how he works a lot of the time. And he views what the saint did as something that is the ultimate injustice. It is such a horrible, unbelievable crime to him that this society, this culture, this civilization that had been around long before the Empire, that had been around through the death of their god and through his creation into his demons and various other saints, through all of that, and had been laid to waste by this horrible, monstrous demon that caused such destruction and death that hardly anything is left but the legends of memories of his once great people. And he wants it back. He wants his fucking empire back. He wants that horrible betrayal, that mass death, that genocide, that cultural erasure and destruction. He wants it all back. And now, he doesn't view the Imperium with any more hatred than the average Chaos follower. He sees again the idea that, well, the God Emperor has duped them. He has deceived them. They've been lied to all their lives when they should have been serving chaos, as is natural, because, of course, he's the traditionalist. He believes in the primordial truth. Mankind and the great kings in the warp work together hand in hand as allies, rather than one being subservient to the other. So he sees it as this mighty betrayal that these human beings, these tools of the kings, or rather their erstwhile intended allies on this mortal plane, they're being misused, abused, and horribly, horribly mangled by this foul empire that caused the death of his great society. And so he goes out and he organizes the Blood Pact after killing off its last leader in order to retake the Sabbat worlds in his crusade, in which he is successful. And he had been intending to kill the saint if she had been found once more, but when he finds her tomb, as we'll talk about, he's a little bit downcast. But with that said, let's get into the actual artwork, shall we? So, I think this is a good place to start. Again, this is Moritz's work. This is the first thing that I got back from him. This is the initial sketch. Now, as you can see here, we have Old Man Nadzabar. At the time of the start of the campaign, he's around 95 years old. So he's definitely an old man. Withered and thin, still broad-shouldered and powerfully built because he is a feral worlder. He is a Guren. He's got these sharp aspects to his face, jaw, chin. You can see the hawk-like nose, big bushy eyebrows. But this was the first thing that I got back from Moritz, and this is the eventual outline of the triptych as we intended to have it. We have the first image, second image in the middle, and the third image at the end. This was just a nice one, and you guys have seen some of the leaked photos that I've put out of Nadzabar's little three-headed image, and I love it a lot, honestly, and I'm really glad Moritz actually gave me another version of these three images for free with some updated features, so we're gonna be adding that in as new character design. So I had some initial concerns with this part of the commission. Of course, it's just an initial sketch. He was 95. So, when he dies, he is 157 years old, and he's never received any rejuvenation treatments or any increases to his longevity, outside of some blessings from the Chaos God. So we'll talk about that in the second image when it comes across, but he doesn't look like a 95-year-old man for all time. Again, one of the first blessings from Chaos is usually long life, but you do actually have to be a pretty active worshiper and actively doing things and in charge of a lot of people for you to receive that blessing. So demagogues often receive the blessing of eternal or very long life, but a 95-year-old is a 95-year-old. You're gonna be a little bit aged, a little bit tired, a little bit worried at the edges, and especially for someone as old as Nadzabar, on a planet that doesn't have, any modern medicine. It is a feral world. On that type of world, he's not going to receive any rejuvenation. He's not going to be getting the correct amount of, nutrition that he would need to stay healthy for that amount of time. But yes, when he dies canonically, he is 157 years old. And he looks like a man who's only aged about a quarter or a third of that time. But we'll talk about that later. Let's do a breakdown of the triptych first. The first one is the Unifier, this image here, and it goes into a lot more detail. We'll get to more parts of it, but this is the first image that we have. We have Nadzabar in the center, holding up the iron grotesque that the Blood Pact will be known for. He's got his scepter or halberd here, and we'll talk about that in a bit. That's kind of a little odd thing that we got to add because it was a fun part of the campaign. He's just shoved the mask onto a man here, and then shoved it into his own face, burning off his visage. You can actually see this kind of exposed fang-like maw with his burnt-off nose. That's when he's taken this red-hot iron grotesque, and he's formed it to his own features by jamming his face into the red-hot iron in order to make it copy the contours of his own face. So you see all the pictures of the Blood Pact, and they all have the iron metal masks, the iron grotesques. It's literally Nadzibar's face. It's his actual face that those are modeled off of. You can see the hooked nose, the sharp jaw, the sunken edges to the face and mouth, and it's burnt all the way off because this image is him forming that mask by putting that red hot iron to his face and pushing it onto his face so that it forms a model onto which to give all of his soldiers within the Blood Pact. So we'll talk about that, but that is the unifier. That is the point at which he really puts himself forward as leader of Gora, warlord, Archon. He's all the way going into it. So he's no longer in the background. He's not in the shadows. He's not shanking people and taking their position anymore. He's not ruling through Urlach Gower anymore. That's the big thing, is he's no longer in the shadow of a warlord. Yep, Barbarous Deantok. Yeah. So he's no longer in the shadow, which is one of the reasons why this is like a huge ritual with all these people involved, but we'll get to it in the next piece. The next one is the Conqueror. And the Conqueror is a pretty unique image, and it's one that we do not really get any lore on whatsoever, because this is during the initial Chaos campaign and crusade back into the Sanguinary Worlds. At this point, Nadzibar and his Magisters, the Jo Sanguinary, or the Brotherhood of the Sanguinary Worlds, as it is spoken in the regular common Imperial tongue, the Jo Sanguinary have managed to wrest Imperial control from the Imperium of Man. That means that the Imperial government has essentially given up, gone away, and they are no longer administering the Sabbat worlds. Now, there are lots of worlds that are still holding out once the government removes the Civitas and flees. Plenty of worlds are holding out, and Nadzibar's dealing with them, but he has one important job to do first. He is born, and as I mentioned in the previous slide, he hates the Saint with a burning passion, furious with this horrible demon that came to rob his people of all that they had ever known and all that they ever were. This vengeance, this vendetta, but also this fear. It's terror. It's a primeval fear. Because you gotta remember, he's reading the stories of the journals of the legends of people who fought during the original combat in the Sabbat worlds when the Imperium were conquering them and destroying their civilization. He had read those texts, and he had read descriptions of the Saint and of her horrifying aspect and how everyone who came by her would just get obliterated with holy fire, and they had all died, and she was a horrible tactical commander and killing everyone, and all these angels were with her, these 2,000 white-clad angels, the White Scars again, and he has this primordial terror that one day, during his crusade, during his time in the primacy, the Saint will reappear. He has this horrible image in his mind, this terrible, gut-wrenching fear that he's going to be at the height of his power, like they were during the olden days, and she's going to come back again. And she's going to kill him. And he has this deep fear, this deep-seated terror, but he's fought the angels again. At this point, he has fought Space Marines, possibly even himself, but at least his forces have come across and defeated angels of the Adeptus Astartes, so maybe that fear isn't as strong, but the fear of the Saint is terror. And he really hasn't come to grasp with that legacy, that fear of this giant demon, until he comes to this scene in the middle. In this scene, he is standing on Hagia, over the tomb of Saint Sabbat. Again, the Chaos Forces didn't leave a lot of details on how she was killed or what happened to her on Harkalon or Gar Baradon because it had been destroyed and any record of it was simply lost. He had some indication that she had left off for some reason, but he didn't know that she was necessarily dead for sure this time until he comes to here. And this image is the image where he finally lays that ancient ghost of fear to rest above her tomb. And that's why this image is referred to as the Conqueror. Because for the first time, this warlord, this religious man, this faithful, history-changing figure comes face to face with the last thing that he was afraid of in this galaxy and conquers that fear above the grave. Which is why you can see here he's getting suited up in his power armor and his equipment, and all his servants, his fellow blood priests, are around him, and he's just standing over this image of terror, and he's conquered it. He has lived beyond it, and he's going to go on to do great things. And then we get to the last image, Nadzabar the monster. Nadzabar the creature, Nadzabar the murderer, Nadzabar the fallen. Nadzabar had a long life. Matter of fact, he and War Master Slato, as much as they were rivals and as much as they were enemies on opposite sides of the Sanguinary Worlds, or of the Sabbat Worlds Crusade, they are the same age. They have much the same disposition in terms of their opinions and their faithfulness, because of course Slato is one of the most faithful war masters to the Saint, as much as Nadzabar is faithful to the kings. And so it is no surprise that at the end of both of their lives, they are together in one image. Now this is the reference that we have of Nadzabar, he being horribly mutated. Now, why is that? Why is he so horribly mutated? What changes? Nadzabar's not mutated throughout most of his life, and of course, one of the things I had more as change was he had visible mutations, and I said, no mutations. He should not have any mutations on his original form until the last form, the monster. Why? Well, it's a pretty interesting thing. Of course, he is a Gorin. He is a traditionally very chaos-resistant individual who does not lend himself to mutations. So why is he mutated at the end? Well, on Balhaut, where he was trapped by the War Master's ploy, and he had sent away all of his fellow leaders and magisters to escape from the battle, he has to do something. Now, Nadzabar does not hold with the ideas of princehood. He does not like the idea of summoning great demons that one cannot control or bargain with. He hates the idea of putting the warp above mankind, because, of course, mankind is the primordial, mankind is the servant, mankind is the ally of the gods, not of their slaves. Which is why he doesn't use those demons above humans, demons in charge of humans. He doesn't hold with it. And that means that he doesn't hold with becoming a demon prince either. But when put into a situation where his only option is to flee in disgrace, or to face unbelievable odds, perhaps he makes a rash decision. And I believe that the reason why he is so mutated, and the reason why he is so changed at the end of his life when both he and Slato meet their ends, is that he went for it. He went out and completed a ritual attempting to ascend to demon princehood in the middle of the battle. And it failed. And Nadzabar the monster, Nadzabar the mutated, Nadzabar the defeated, walks back through the halls of the Doctrinopolis on Balhaut. 3 arms, 3 weapons, power armor, mutations, and multiple heads and faces visible, slaughtering with his Death Brigade bodyguards, the last of his loyal pact sons on Balhaut, his life wards and protectors. He goes through the Silver Guard's first company like a fucking hurricane. And at this point, he is a pseudo-prince. He's not a chaos spawn. He's not some mindless monster, but he is a monster. He is almost a demon. And for that reason, he is so dangerous and so deadly. Granted, a little bit less than human, a little bit more than human. It's questionable at that point. But he's able to defeat enough of the Silver Guard's Terminators that eventually he finds and engages with the War Master. Now, of course, War Master Slato is featured in this image, and we will see more of him later, but the Silver Guard are his opponent first, and he shreds them. He obliterates multiple squads of First Company Terminators, and eventually comes into combat with both their Chapter Master in Terminator Plate and Slato. Now, their Chapter Master does manage to survive, narrowly, but Slato and Nadzabar eventually, oh so poetically, end up killing one another. And that is the canonical end of Nadzabar's story, but let's go back a little bit and talk about some nicer days. Moritz, of course, furnished us with some absolutely beautiful trial runs of this artwork, and I had given him several different ideas on how we could set up Nadzabar's weapons. Of course, we had no actual indication of what Nadzabar's weapons even were, or what they looked like, so I had to kind of suss it out. And the first thing that we ended up having in Corrupt Contenders was this. This is a large halberd or staff. Traditionally, or originally, it was actually just a regular staff with kind of a messed up flared halberd head, but due to a pretty impressive ritual, we ended up binding a pair of, I think they were pink horrors, into the staff's crystalline head, which actually gives this thing the ability to cast a little fireball, almost like a psychic spell. So that's his first weapon. It's this fire-breathing halberd, which, yeah, is really, really cool. The second one, of course, we needed a ranged weapon. Originally, we were kind of dithering between plasma pistol and something else, but at the end of the day, we decided that a Volkite pistol would be a better idea, and so this was the original idea for the plasma pistol, but we changed it to a Volkite pistol eventually. And then the last one, we had to go with a much more traditional weapon. This is a design that kind of originates from Gura, that lighter, kind of super curved, artisanal, or artistic-like swordbreaker slash scimitar. And you can see the gap where it's designed to hold other weapons, but this is a power sword. It is a custom-made power sword patterned off of the melee weapons that are traditional to the feral world of Gura, with that heavy curve and this swordbreaker hilt. Yeah, so the Volkite weapon is actually from one of the Forge worlds. So far we haven't exactly decided where it's from necessarily, but it's very likely that it's from either Belshir Binary, Fortis Binary, or Ermune. One of those three is where we source that Volkite caliber from. So, that's the weaponry that we're working with, and in my opinion, it's a pretty good spread. We have an anti-armor ranged weapon with the Volkite pistol. We have our standard dueling weapon. In this case, it's a one-handed one for sure, in this power sword. And then we have his two-handed option, which is the staff that also shoots some nice, nasty warp fire. Yeah, you have plenty of weapons. I literally made in canon Sheabal Red Hand. I gave him his first weapons as Nadzabar. I gave him an enchanted bolt pistol and an enchanted chainsword. So don't blame me. I gave you plenty of stuff, Alfarius. And then over here we have the first kind of outlined image. Again, this is from the Conqueror, and you'll notice he looks a lot younger than he does in the original art, right? Like, this is clearly a 95-year-old man. Where is this, not necessarily young man, but where's this man in his prime coming from? Where is this beefcake all that time? Well, that's the result of some chaos messery. Well, before Nadzabar embarks on his actual journey to go off and to unify first the Sanguinary Worlds, and then to set out on his greater crusade into the Sabbat Worlds as a whole, he wants to meet with his kings. Again, this is a man who genuinely thinks that the Chaos Gods want to speak and interact with mankind on a personal level. And he thinks that if he wants to get their blessing to go on this crusade, he doesn't want to just speak with them in prayer. He doesn't want to just talk to one of their heralds. He's already talked to some of their heralds. He wants to talk with God. He wants to speak with the King of War himself before he returns to go do his duty. Again, Nadzabar sees himself as a bishop, as that direct go-between between the kings, the gods, and mankind that he's trying to elevate, to get back into the true way of living, the right way of living, the way of chaos worship, the way of his ancestors, and the way of the tradition within the Sabbat worlds. So he does. He travels into the warp with proper protections, probably not enough protections, but he travels into the warp, into Khorne's domain. And it is a brutal journey, both for the Psyker, who is holding open the portal for him, and for himself. Inside of the warp, he's exposed both to the direct conflicts of demons, greater demons, lesser demons, and also other creatures that live within the warp. And he spends some couple of hours within the realms of the God of Blood before he actually does meet with the shadow of a aspect of Khorne. Essentially, a giant pillar of flame comes out of the citadel and essentially identifies the one mortal within the midst of this maelstrom, within this hellfire abomination pit, and it sees him, recognizes him, and sends him back changed. Now, what is the change? Well, essentially, a 95-year-old man now has the body that he had in his prime. So you're seeing Nadzabar at the age of maybe 30 or 40, but his physical mind and his knowledge is that of a 95-year-old. And of course, since this is the Conqueror, this is probably the body that he has when he's in reality, probably about 150, 125 years old. So he has all this history, all this age, all this power, but then Khorne gives him a body to match. He returns to him what time stole from him, essentially validating his crusade and letting him know, the kings have your back, you're on the right track, continue. And this is one of my favorite things about this artwork, especially the line work. Not only do these greaves and stuff look really cool, considering that it's human pattern power armor, but also I love the Pickelhaube with the like Japanese kabuki mask, angry mouthpiece, because that fits so well. It also gives Nadzabar's massive hawk-like nose space within the helmet. He's got room to put his nose inside of his face mask. But yeah, that was round 2, figuring out exactly what that was going to look like. And of course, he does also have the tattoo of the eye on his head. But continuing, now we get to a little bit more detail. The first one here that we have is back to the very beginning. Again, that was the round 2 of the Conqueror. That was what we sussed out on that. Here's the round 2 of the Monster and the Unifier. Yeah. Yeah, he wants that free air. Damn right. With the nose, the nose mark. Yep. So here we have. Yeah, he needs some room for his nose. Yes, he does. Here we have him burning off his nose. So here is that ritual that I talked about in the Unifier. You can see all the Blood Pact troops behind him. You can see the 2 other first Magisters. Over here we have a never before pictured Magister, Enoch Innocenti. Now, Enoch was another warlord on Gura who eventually was kind of tricked into following Nadzabar, but eventually chose to follow him after the Ascension. And then here is Urlok Gower in his more traditional armor with 2 blood priests beside him. And here we have Nadzabar in his robes. You can see, again, this is the body of a 95-year-old man. Granted, a well-built 95-year-old man, but still a 95-year-old man. Yeah, the nose is wild. Yeah, especially over here. The absolute hawkbill nose is wild. But back to the Ascension ritual. You can see he's standing out in front of a megastructure. In this case, this is actually the spaceport. One of the first things that the Gurans do once they're unified under Nadzabar is to create an actual spaceport out of a couple of ships that were kindly donated by the Charismites. Essentially, we organize with this off-world cult to give us some leavings, and then we set up a spaceport on the planet. And as a result of this, Nadzabar is able to unify all of the Blood Pact under his rule, and also get several other warbands, like Enoch's, under his command. Now, what is the context to the Ascension ritual? We'll talk about that in a bit, but you can just see how absolutely horrifyingly painful. He's literally burning his face off with this red-hot mask by stabbing it into his face and mouth. And then here was the first shot of the monster Nadzibar. Again, the canonical description of Nadzibar at his end is a hunched, curved creature covered in chitinous chitin plating and with three faces where first there had been one. Now, the Imperials claim that they burned Nadzibar's body. I don't think that's actually true for quite a few reasons. The first of which being that, well, they probably wouldn't have been able to burn it. Two, it would have been very unlikely that they would burn something that big, and also, how to get it off-world and all that different type of stuff. But either way, different thing. It's after his death. It doesn't really matter. But you can see here two faces, the kind of demonic visage of whatever was trying to inhabit him to make him a demon prince, and then his own horrified visage. Again, Nadzibar views demons with a certain level of disgust, disdain, and ignorance. Just like, if I ignore it, it will go away because it's not really real. It's just a slave to the god that I serve, or to the god that works with me and supports me. So he almost views them with a certain amount of disgust or disdain, and it's one of the reasons why it takes him literally being at the end of his rope to go in and attempt this elevation or the ascension ritual. So you can see, even in this original image, I love the face because it's just this definite show of, God, what the hell is going on? I've fallen so far that this mindless beast has attached itself to me. It's really almost pitiful in a way, how just out of it, just absolutely in denial of what's going on, he is at the very end of his life. And I really love both of these images because it shows how a great man rises to power and how a great man falls from power so quickly. So, just continuing on another set of round two, you can just see how Moritz has put so much love into this line work and into this artwork. You can see the first hints and shots of color, and then, of course, even more detail here. This is a little bit better image than the original, because you can see not only a fallen Silver Guard Terminator, but also you can see more of his Death Brigade. Death Brigade are the equivalent of Tempestus Scions for the Blood Pact. They're all equipped with heavy carapace, heavy weapons, or hell guns, or hotshot las guns. And traditionally, there were 1,000 of them, just as bodyguards for the various Magisters, and another 1,000 usually just for Nadzibar himself as like a personal retinue. But they are life wards. Life wards literally are bodyguards expected to give their lives so that their master may live. Yes, the Death Brigade are incredibly based. And they do remain on after Nadzibar's death, which, technically they shouldn't. Should they have all died defending him? Here's the reason why. He gives some of them to other Magisters and essentially has them follow them instead. So that's why the Death Brigade continue on, and a lot of them follow Urlach Gower because the Gower is the leader of the Blood Pact. But here you can see more of that image. You can see Slato, two more Terminators, and the mutated Nadzibar. I like this one a lot. The original had him in more of a Terminator armor design, but I almost like this more. Because you can see he's got like a dragon foot here. He's got a massive, thick, like alligator or dragon tail. He's got a bunch of those chitinous insectile protrusions on his arms, and look how massive his arms are. They literally look like Karn with his one enormous bicep, and that's what you would expect for somebody who had just gone through essentially a botched ascension ritual to try and become a demon prince. He's halfway there, and what probably should have been another 2 arms, or at least another 4th arm, have slowed down and become different limbs. And you can see he's kind of half mutated, almost halfway through, with the multiple faces and all that. But yeah, this is just such a great image, and I'm glad that Moritz went on and added even more detail to it. But we'll get to that in the final. And here you can see just another even better image. And of course, the first shot of the actual Volkite. His Volkite caliber, I think it is, with the rifle. More detail on Slato. Again, Slato was injured at the beginning of their fight. Nadzibar deals him 11 more mortal wounds before the two of them end up killing one another. But even before this point, he has slain multiple other Terminators along with his Death Brigadiers. And you can see their huge armor and all that nasty stuff. I love the Death Brigade so much. They even have like the Signet shields that Space Marines do. And you'll also notice this is the first time that we see the use of the Blood Pact insignia. Now, again, this is the Warrior Pact symbol. It is essentially the icon of one who's been indoctrinated into the Blood Pact as a actual trooper. I also love how the armor with his increased form looks way more like traditional body armor, like a sappy plate, than it does power armor. But yeah, this symbol here is a custom one that I had a friend in college make for me. He made it for me with a flag. It says Troopers of Corn Fight for Freedom. And that's really what this traditionally represents. And it becomes the battle standard of the Pact because it's not a traditional cornate symbol. It is a version of it, but it's not the traditional cornate symbol. It's a modification on it to indicate that it is a war flag only, and it is actually a symbol of liberation. And that's what Nadzabar sees it as. That symbol of the Blood Pact, the icon of corn that they modify to their own uses, is supposed to be a liberation icon. It's supposed to be an icon of freedom, something that is protecting and freeing the inhabitants of the Sabbat worlds from the yoke of a deceiving, evil, enslaving empire that caused the death of everything that was good in Nadzabar's eyes. And so, just a great image here. Now, who's this lovely lady on the left here? Well, this was one that is from Corrupt Contenders specifically. During the first couple of years that Nadzabar ends up going around the place, he's looking very hard, high and low, for an Imperial that he can pump for information. He's planning to conquer an entire Imperial sector. He needs help. He needs somebody who knows the sector. He needs somebody who knows all about all of these things and is able to give him information. And he finds someone. Two someones, actually. He finds a priest and a sister of battle. Yeah, that's a sister. Or it will be. So, these two are essentially being human trafficked on a planet called Aeskira. Aeskira is essentially a kind of semi-airless rock out in the Sanguinary worlds. It is a haunt of pirates and deserters and slave traders and some Xenos abominations like the Luxatl. It is chaos-afflicted, but not as bad as somewhere like Gura, because it is a little bit further to the south. Yeah. Takes on Nadzabar as just a man and kills him. Yeah, I appreciate that comment. Thank you very much. We'll go all the way into that at some point, because yeah, it's quite a battle both ways. I'm not gonna lie. The description of the battle between Nadzabar and Slato is that it is so brutal and destructive and releases so much energy that not only does it destroy a portion of the actual Doctrinopolis Cathedral, it also drives everyone, including the first company Terminators, from the room. They can't even be in the same room while these two are fighting. So, in my opinion, it's probably likely that Slato ascends himself to be a saint of the moment when he's fighting Nadzabar, but for a few minutes, it's half prince fighting full-on saint, at least for a short period of time. And it's some monstrous combat, for real. Especially because you can see in some of the art of Slato, he seems to look far younger in his death throes, or when he dies, which would give even more credence to the idea of him being a momentary saint or receiving sainthood when he's face-to-face with Nadzabar, which is also why he's so driven to lead from the front and to engage Nadzabar himself. It's the Emperor pushing him to try and fight Nadzabar, and so that they can have their final climactic battle, which, yes, is very, very cool, and I like it. So, back to this individual. This is a Sister of Battle named Vress. Why is she being human trafficked through a planet in the Sanguinary worlds? Well, she is a sister who was repentant, let's say. She was a sister who, unfortunately, had developed a mutation. What was that mutation? Psychic powers. Yeah, For whatever reason, there was an unfortunate happenstance, likely through warp exposure, that released or at least exacerbated an existing latent psychic potential in this Sister of Battle that had since been not, or had previously not been noticed, and as a result, she was sent to be repentant, and as a result of her repentance, she was captured, and then trafficked through the sanguinary worlds for information. Nadzibar picks the two of them, the priest and the Sister of Battle, up from Aeskira and essentially uses them to organize and to set up, yes, Mind Witch, to organize and set up the crusade. But there was a big issue that I had with this image, and that is that he doesn't turn the sister to chaos. Her name is Vress. He doesn't turn Vress to chaos. He doesn't intentionally try and corrupt her or anything. Hell, he actually tries to protect her from corruption on Gura to a greater or lesser degree, even though she's continually getting worse and worse because her psychic potential is making her suffer. Unfortunately, Nadzibar himself does eventually develop some psychic acuity and some abilities with psychic powers, a partial addition of his blessings from Khorne and his return to earlier power. Yeah, it's definitely heresy, but Vress is about as close as we're going to get to a psychic sister. So my initial problem was, hey, number one, she doesn't worship chaos. He doesn't push her to worship chaos. No chaos icon, no staff. She's going to be holding a copy of the Lectitio Divinitatus for 100%. She's going to have that stuff and no mutations. And you can see he did exactly what I asked. Outside of a tiny little mutation, which we left because it was canonical, this is what Vress looked like canonically. This is our good image of the sister that Nadzibar essentially uses to help understand Imperial faith. Because, of course, he's lived in Chaos Society his whole life. He doesn't know what the cult of the God Emperor looks like, what they worship, how their churches work, how their actual faith originates, how it works all together, and so he uses this Sister of Battle to help him out with that, essentially. And of course, because she's a psyker, he uses her for those purposes as well, to help him out with ritualism and things of that nature. Now, is it a little bit of Stockholm Syndrome that he uses to get her to be more cooperative? Yes, to a degree, but I think the DM who is working with me in that chat can agree no violence or harm was intentionally done to the Sister of Battle, and she's doing just fine, TM, after all of the horrible things that TBH, Nadzibar, and her have also been through. And here is her in the background of that image, and also an updated version of the Art of Enoch Innocenti, which I really, really like. I like this kind of classic gladiator knight helmet and that kind of stuff. Do me into a Yep. You're not rolling for it, buddy. Alright, so getting back to this image, you can see the megastructure. So the reason he doesn't want to corrupt the sister is, one, he doesn't really believe that chaos is corrupting. He doesn't see it as some sort of negative influence that he can use to destroy a person. He sees it as a religion. He sees it as a faith. And he sees other people who are already individuals of faith, be it sisters, preachers, in one case an imperial commissar that he meets. He doesn't try and just blast them with corruption or trick them or abuse them into believing in chaos. He genuinely believes that he can preach, he can talk, and he can diplomacy anyone into belief in chaos, because at the heart of it, he believes, and he's not wrong, that humans are more connected to the warp and to the kings than they are connected to the God Emperor. Because, of course, humans have been around longer than the God Emperor, and he's been a god for less time than the kings have. So he just sees it as, well, humans are the main fuel for the gods in our worship, in our souls, in our service to them, and in their service to us, of course. So he would rather try and talk someone into it. Yeah, he's mini Lorgar, except he actually has principles and isn't a massive frickin' hypocrite. Because, again, Nadzibar is very serious on his principles. He does not take no for an answer. He doesn't do any of that BS that Lorgar does to try and get power. Again, Nadzibar's not out for power. He's here to glorify and uplift the entire human race. And he actually does it. Lorgar talks about doing it. Nadzibar actually does it. He goes out to set up a massive, organized, orderly Chaos Empire. And I know, orderly Chaos Empire. How does that make sense? Well, Nadzibar lived it. He knows it. His ancient ancestors, who lived in this area long before the Imperium, They had that. They had that organized empire. They had that human beings living and thriving in relative harmony with the warp. And so he knows it can be done, and that's what he's seeking to do. And that's why he doesn't believe in doing things like massively corrupting people or intentionally trying to destroy someone with chaos corruption. So that's why he doesn't go and try and just outright corrupt her, because it's antithetical to what he believes. He believes that chaos wouldn't be chaos, it wouldn't be as worthy of worship if he had to force someone into it. So, back to this image. Who is this gentleman here? Well, this is what I call the young blood. Essentially, this is a gentleman, one of the Pact Sons, one of the younger Pact Sons, who comes about after Nadzabar kills the old leader of the Pact, and he puts up Gower as the new leader to work as his proxy, so that he can command the Blood Pact. Yeah, you gotta like Nadzabar. He's such a great character. I love him so much. Why do I make an entire channel where I am him? I love him. This young blood, this young gentleman, Nadzabar was essentially using him and kind of grooming him as an example for the rest of the Pact. He had this gentleman come up during the Ritual of Ascension when he was unifying Gura under his leadership as Archon. By the way, the titles Archon means Lord of the Zhou Sanguinary, or Lord of the Empire. Gower means Lord of the Blood Pact. Anarch means Lord of the Sanguinary Worlds, but it can also just mean like a lieutenant of the Archon, which is why Enoch originally has the title of Anarch. And then eventually it's given to, given to Inheritor, or to Heritor Asphodel with the title Inheritor, but that might be a new title. And then eventually Anaquinar Sec declares himself Anarch to Urlach Gower, long after Nadzabar is dead. This gentleman was a younger Blood Pact trooper, and he was all gung-ho. He was super into chaos. He was trying to be a blood mage and a warrior at the same time. He was trying to be an honored chosen, a warrior, a monster, all that kind of stuff. He was trying to be great on his own and by his own merit and his own power. And so Nadzabar talked him up into it. He told him, yeah, go after it. I believe in you. Get that done. And then at the Ascension... Okay, Moritz, you have a good one. I'm so glad that you came along. It's so special having somebody here who did that. But you have a good night, buddy. That's our artist for this entire thing going on. Such great work. Thank you once again, my friend. It is also hard to not look good in comparison to Lorgar. But this gentleman, who Nadzabar had encouraged, had cajoled him to go up and do a fiery speech about conquest and death and blood and service. Nadzabar turns around, says, "Good job," takes a white-hot iron grotesque and shoves it onto his face. So, what did he mean by this? Nadzabar was essentially trying to make a point. 2 points, in fact. One, the young, those who are corrupted by the modern day, those who have lost sight of tradition, who say bah to tradition, who say goodbye to the legacy of the Sanguinary Worlds. It's time to make anew. It's time to create a new empire. It's time to worship the gods in a different way. Those who try and take my place as a priest and an intermediary, I will kill them. And in the most horrible and agonizing way, as publicly as I possibly can. Literally burns the guy's face off after encouraging him to make a public speech to all of his fellow Pact Sons. Then Nadzabar goes up, explains, that is what happens to anyone who thinks that they are greater than their station. We are men-at-arms, and we are serfs. We have a job to do in conjunction with our kings. We are not masters. We are not gods. We are not slaves to others. Don't be like him. And then he takes the mask, heats it again, shoves it onto his own face, forms it, holds it up, and then has them start making copies for all the other Pact Sons. He also fights a couple of nice show duels against both Enoch and the Gower, to cement his title as the Archon. Yeah, no gods or kings, only man. It's very much, he's almost a human supremacist. Like, genuinely. Beyond the gods and greater demons, humans are above. You know, Angels, Space Marines, they're kind of like an offset. They could be greater or lower than mankind, but humans are above everything except for the gods themselves. It did also rain blood at the end of this ritual. Because Gora. But yeah, it did rain blood at the end of this ritual. But yeah, a very fitting start to what would be the Archonhood of Nadzibar. And that was his opening thing. This is before he goes into the warp to meet with Khorne, and he has his face put back together, and then, of course, his body rejuvenated to a much younger age. But that's the context for this incredible image. You have all of these people looking on as he first denounces this ambitious individual, and then marks himself with this castigating symbol that will then go on to be the marquee of the Blood Pact. Yes, you were there. You were there when the Archon burned his nose. That's Sheabal, by the way, for anyone who wasn't paying attention. Alpharius Omegon is our Sheabal. So, finishing touches. The last couple pieces, again, we saw this image before, but this just has a couple of more things filled in. And this is that Conqueror image with a lot more detail. And this is, again, where you can see those three weapons in better profile. You can see his shoulder pieces to his armor, another Death Brigadier up here, his halberd, all these blood priests like what Nadzibar used to be, all standing over the saint's tomb on Hagia. That's funny. So this is the tomb of Saint Sabbat. Up to this point, up to this exact moment where he steps foot on Hagia, and he hopefully peacefully steps within the tomb of Saint Sabbat, he is not sure whether or not this massive nightmare demon is going to come and sweep him from existence. And up until this point, even though he has defeated the Imperials, even though he's unified and prospered and his campaign has taken away the government of the Imperium, he still fears the God Emperor's retribution. Directly. Like, he fears direct impingement, direct involvement of this greater demon in his eyes. And he stands above this grave and understands that all of that fear, all of that preparation, and she's dead. Already. So it's a very powerful image of him realizing that the last thing that he had to fear has been removed from his path. And he's now ready to go on to even greater heights. So we have the first couple images in color. Yeah, baby, we're finally out of sketches and we're into the color shit. You can see Nadzibar in his traditional robes, his face absolutely mutilated by the red-hot iron grotesque. You can see his staff with its great red gem. You can see Gura with its reddish desert-like light. Our unfortunately ambitious Pact Son here, pictured missing his face. You can see the more traditional version of Urlach Gower. Again, Gura is very low in terms of technology and also in terms of metal. That's been improved slightly by the assistance of other groups, such as pirates or by the Charismites. So you can see that the demagogues, at least, like Enoch and Urlach, they've got full metal weapons, full metal armor, a bunch of extra equipment, and Nadzibar himself, of course, has his staff. And you can see the real difference between the warlords of Gura and the blood priests of Gura. Okay, so Sek for this, for our campaign, is a traitor inquisitor. He's either crazy, or he sees visions of the future that makes him want to join Chaos, or he joins Chaos trying to undermine them, and then he turns full chaotic and becomes an enemy of the Imperium. In either case, he's currently on Geryon. Geryon is a pretty good distance from here, and it's going to be a while before Chaos catches up with him. And we add him to the group as a Magister. Whether he intends to undermine us and destroy us, or whether he intends to join us genuinely after his visions of the future, or maybe he even has to talk to Nadzibar to talk about that, but either way, he is a traitor Inquisitor. So currently, at this point, he's just an Inquisitor on a planet called Geryon. And actually, a lot of that is up to our buddy Wallflower, to Syndicless Wallflower, who's currently playing an Aquanar Sec in our campaign. But yeah, he's not here right now because we are now in the Sanguinary Worlds of Gura. And you can see behind a lot of firearms and these blood pact troopers. And two more blood priests, and of course, Vress, our lovely lady, sister of battle here. So at this point, Nadzabar is in charge of all of Gura. He has an entire planet at his back, several million civilians to start producing and organizing his. Oh, sorry, yeah, not Sec. Oh, shoot. Who is it? It's Triply, right? Oh, shit. Sorry, it's Tribly. Tribly, homie, I'm sorry, I forgot somebody else was Sec. Yeah, sorry. Tribly is playing. Wallflower is playing Alakarn, who is a different Magister. And Sec is being played by Tribly Bibly, who's up here. Yeah, uh, Tribly Ulyanov on YouTube. My bad. Yeah, a lot of them are either corrupt or worthless. It's mostly because the Sabbat Worlds is considered a bit of a backwater. Outside of being very religious and having a lot of religious symbology and imagery, it doesn't really have a lot of important industry. Remember, all of their Forge Worlds are basically either halfway defunct or second rate. So forges are not important. They don't really have a lot of industrial worlds. Yes, you do love to antagonize the Iron Warriors. Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm playing the Iron Warriors, so you're great. I'm kidding. So yeah, a lot of the stuff about the Inquisitors in the Sabbat Worlds Crusades being absolutely terrible at their job mostly comes down to the fact that, well, they don't have a really good reason to actually do their job because they're in a series or a set of worlds that are not all that important or weren't all that important up until Nadzibar started taking them. So, yeah, they didn't have much to worry about until then. And let's be honest, some of them, like Rhyme or The Circle or like Sec, were probably bad eggs to begin with, or they got corrupted because Chaos has never gotten this strong before. And because the Inquisition couldn't get to it quickly, they essentially had no defense against it when it became that powerful. Because they've never dealt with a Chaos force this insidious, led by humans, that was this large in the history of the Imperium of Man. Ever. It's never happened. No crusade from the Eye of Terror has ever been this widespread and this successful. It's never happened. And there were barely any Marines involved in the Sabbat Worlds Crusade. It was maybe like less than 1,000 Marines in total. Tens of millions of soldiering cultists, and of course the Blood Pact, but the Blood Pact never really get above 750,000 men. You know, and that's under the days of Erlock Gower. Before that, you're looking at significantly less in terms of armed men. Several regiments worth at the very most, and outside of that, they're being held up by other cult forces. But yeah, this is the first color image of the Unifier. And I think it's really, really cool to have this. The Unifier is such an important image for Nadzibar because this is his origin story. This is Gura. This is his home. This is his history. And he's finally in charge. Remember, blood priests were like bishops. They couldn't really hold public office. They couldn't be warlords and religious men. He has managed to do what no other warlord could do. Be both a warlord, a leader of soldiers at arms, the Blood Pact and Enoch's warband, and also a religious man, a go-between between the kings and mankind. And he intends to use it to his absolute maximum. Better than Abaddon the Armless and Lorgar. Yes, he technically is. Yeah, he, unironically, never has a force in the history of the entire Imperium of Man conquered and held an entire sector of Imperial space for this long and resisted the Imperium this successfully. Remember, the only two things that are even close is the Badab Wars, in which case multiple chapters of Astartes were needed. Not a single chapter of Astartes helped Nadzibar. None. He basically had a couple of rogue Iron Warriors, Death Guard / Black Legion, and World Eaters on his side, and that was it. Maybe a couple of Emperor's Children, but that was literally a handful, less than like 20. So in total, there were probably less than 100, maybe even less than like, I would say at absolute maximum, there were probably no more than 300 Adeptus Astartes helping the Sabbat Worlds Crusade at any point. The rest of it was entirely mortal. And they managed to hold an entire sector and fight off an Imperial crusade proper, in addition to conquering all that territory in the first place. All led by this guy. You shocked how he doesn't have any lore? All of that led by this guy. One man. One monster of a man, and has loyal retainers, allies, and magisters. Conquering all that, taking all of that territory, and yet no art, no lore, no canon, no nothing. God, I hate GW. I'm kidding. I don't want to be mean. I'm waxing lyrically about this, so I don't want to be mean. Yeah, I'd love them to get more attention, but yeah. So that's the other thing. GW has never actually officially finished the Sabbat Worlds Crusade. We don't really know how it goes. I am attempting to recreate it with Corrupt Contenders, but yeah, it's very different. So, on to the next image. Of course, we have the Conqueror. The Conqueror image shows a couple of things that I like, even though this isn't the detailed final print. You can see that kind of dark red armor of both his helmet, of the Blood Pack Troopers and all that, but also you can see the smokiness in the room, and I think that's really cool with all the incense and stuff, and his sword. But the more important thing is, look at these little claws and his awesome mustache. I love Nadzibar's beard and mustache combo. Man is dapper as fuck. Little twisty mustache and his sharp little goatee. Very Saruman-esque. Very evil carnival attendant-esque. Plus, he's got adorable little claws. He's got little sharp black curled nails that he has that are just like little claws. And I think that's absolutely awesome as well. Not to mention, incredible six-pack. But yeah, this is, rejuvenated Nadzibar after he's gone and conquered most of the Sabbat worlds. Yeah, he is like buff Saruman. And especially in the way that he works. Saruman is not Gandalf. He's not a sword and board fighter or a sword and staff fighter. He's not magic and mystery. He's like an actual religion guy. He's like an actual priest, because that's his tradition. But he is a good soldier as well. Maybe not as militaristically minded as someone like Urlach, but he is also far more forward-thinking and more diplomatic than Urlach Gower is, especially when it comes to getting other people to follow him. You gotta remember, he finds and incorporates all these other groups. There are at least 6 other magisters with massive cults that work for Nadzibar. And Nadzibar is demonstrably in charge. A lot of people like to look at the Chaos Jo Sanguinary, the explosion out of the Sanguinary worlds. They just say that it's a random collection of various cults that all decided to act at the same time. It's total bullshit. That's literally Imperial propaganda. Confirmed Imperial propaganda. That's actually not true. The truth is that this man, that Nadzibar, is leading a coalition of powerful chaos warlords and driving them with a force of charisma and with a force of power that has never before been seen by mankind. Never have so many strong, impassioned, and individually powerful leaders of the Dark Gods followed a single figure like they follow Nadzibar. And you gotta remember, there's no infighting when Nadzibar is alive. At least not that we hear about. During the original expansion, during the original crusade, nobody's at each other's throats. Nobody's killing each other. There's no infighting. There's no civil war going on. There's no backfighting while Nadzibar is alive. He's doing the diplomacy. He's doing the backroom deals. He's doing the agreements between all of these Chaos Lords, and he's actually succeeding in getting them to work together. And a literally impossible prospect for other warlords. Imagine for a second Abaddon trying to hold together Mortarion, Perturabo, Fulgrim, and Lorgar. Trying to get all 4 of them to work together. That's literally what Nadzibar is doing. He's taking other magisters that are as powerful or even more powerful than he is, and he is allying with them as fellows, as part of a sanguinary brotherhood, the Zhou Sanguinary, and he is leading them and organizing them and providing them with plans and doing diplomacy around them such that they fulfill his goal of massive conquest. And this is beyond a political thing. This is literally a theology thing. And that's where I come back to the idea of human perfectionism or human supremacy for Nadzibar. It's one of the reasons why he's so important to this movement, because he puts the humans first. When he runs into Chaos Marines, he doesn't just immediately defer to them. He treats them as if they were human, and he also puts other humans who are more useful than they are, like the Magisters, he puts them above them. He doesn't automatically think that the stronger person is the person who should be in charge. He's not the strongest person in the entire Zhou Sanguinary. Why is he in charge? Because he is more diplomatic, more forward-thinking, and more religiously connected and blessed than any of the other Magisters. And he's the origin for the entire crusade. He has that primacy and veterancy that the others do not. And he's also very good at organizing. Sorry. Rough 40k characters. Da, da, da. Oh, yeah. I would also be angry if someone called Call the leader of the AdMech. I'm so sorry, Tuna. That sounds very insulting. Horus Heresy ruined the Emperor? Well, I don't know. I mean, we'll save that for the Q&A section. But did the Horus Heresy ruin the Emperor? I would say no. It definitely changes a lot of the things that he did in retrospect. And it kind of indicated that his plan might have been flawed from the outset. And in my opinion, it was flawed from the outset. He was kind of just trying his absolute best at a goal that probably couldn't have been achieved anyway. But at the very least, he had good intentions. Yeah. And then finally, we get to the monster color image. You can see our soon-to-be saint of the moment, Warmaster Slato. You can see these purple-garbed silver guards. Again, these are first company Terminators, along with this gentleman who has been laid low by my mighty Volkite pistol, and possibly my power sword. But yeah, whatever. Yeah, this is really gorgeous. And to see the monster, you can see that there's an extra head that Moritz added for me, because I said, he canonically has 3 heads. Can I get an extra head? And can it be a dragon head to go with the dragon leg and tail? And he was like, I got you, boss. And I'm like, you are the best. But yeah, this is so pretty. And you can see the outlining and the coloring for the Blood Pack Troopers. These ones are really cool. Again, I had a lot of references for this, but this is the color version of this art. And then you can see the actual triptych, how all 3 of them look together. Again, these are early line art versions, but you can take a little look at this. We have the Unifier once again, the Ascension Ritual, all the Magisters in the background. The middle one, we have the Conqueror overcoming that eternal terror, standing over the grave of Saint Sabat, prepping up for fighting, all that kind of stuff. And then finally, we have the monster. We have this horrifying image of the top of the Doctrinopolis. He's been fighting through all of these Terminators. He's really been abandoned by all of the other Magisters. And he's about to meet with the individual who has given both of them so much of a nightmare over this period of time, and fighting Slato in the background there. So, that is the end of part 1. I know I started a little bit early, so I am going to stick around for at least 20 or maybe 26 minutes for a Q&A. I just want to thank Moritz Bludau again, just so much. All of that artwork was from him, and he was here for a little bit, and I thank him for coming into this. I know it's really late, it's like midnight where he is, but for real, I just have to say, once again, thank you to all of you guys, but more importantly, let's hear what you have to say. If you guys want me to go back to other slides, if you guys want me to talk more about the lore, there's lots of stuff that I didn't necessarily get into, but I'm going to stick around for a little bit for Q&A. You guys feel free to do as you please. Are the mechanics involved at all in this whole thing? Yes, there are. So, not only are there various Forge Worlds that get attacked and involved with Chaos, either they fall to Chaos and they begin producing for the Blood Pact and for other Zhou Sanguinary forces, But there are also various Mechanicus individuals who get involved later with the Dark Mechanicum, and more importantly, technically he's not Mechanicus, but he does a lot of Mechanicus things. I'd highly recommend looking into Heritor Asphodel. Heritor Asphodel is actually wanted by the Mechanicus, because they think that he may be a rogue tech priest, but he's actually not. He's just a very technologically gifted individual who is responsible for a lot of the warp horror nonsense that makes a mockery of Mechanicus technology, and he is one of the Magisters. His name, Inheritor or Heritor Asphodel, relates to him being the inheritor of the Sabbat worlds. Essentially, he claims a bunch of worlds for himself to inherit. He also sets up his own kind of semi-Dark Mechanicus college called the Inheritor College, which is designed to increase and to improve the understanding of technology for people in the Blood Pact, essentially, and for other Chaos forces. He's responsible for the woe machines and all that kind of crazy stuff. Did the sister turn to Chaos? Well, it's a bit of a long story. Did she turn to Chaos? Technically, no, but she did become a lot more cooperative with Nadzabar eventually, after she realized that she could not ignore the fact that she was a Psyker. Essentially, once it was made obvious to her that just repressing the powers that she had, especially on a corrupted world like Gura, was going to cause her more harm than good, she started to learn how to use them a bit more, and then eventually she developed some unfortunately difficult mutations, and is currently considered, let's say, she's on our side, but she's had some unfortunate accidents that have resulted in her being a little bit less human than she once was. So she's still friendly, and still on board with Nadzabar, definitely friendly with him, but Nadzabar's like, okay, you've done enough, you've suffered enough, I'm gonna, like, set you up in a palace somewhere, and hopefully you can live out the rest of your life comfortably. Yeah. She's not Chaos Spawn. She's still completely sane, and she is consistently mutated. So it's not inconsistent mutations. She's not a Spawn. She still has her mind and her powers, but she has developed... How was it explained to me? You know what a beetle's carapace looks like? Well, she's developed essentially beetle-like features down to, like, her hips. So face, back, arms, all of that has kind of become beetle-like. Like a beetle. She's a beetle now. Whoops! That happened after the whole Nadzabar trying to go into the warp to talk to Korn thing. Yeah, Nadzabar is very much about mercy, because you gotta remember, in his mentality, human beings, and more importantly, human life, is more important than blessings of the gods. Sacrifices must be made, obviously, but he goes out of his way to try and use rituals and supplies and religious stuff instead of human sacrifice where he can. Now, there are sacrifices, and that's what a lot of the serfs can be used for, but it's always as few as possible and as controlled and as high of a chance of success as possible so that it doesn't have to be done recklessly or needlessly. That's his whole point, is human life is precious. All humans that can worship the gods and fulfill their primordial purpose for being, they should. And it should be my job to bring as many of them to the light as physically possible. And that's his whole point of existence, and that's why he really does show a lot of mercy. Like, he goes out of his way to try and keep war crimes from happening. He does his best to try and make the crusade into a civilizing mission, aka trying to go in and enlighten people and improve their lives, free them from bondage, free them from slavery, improve their ability to take care of themselves, rather than just being like, kill all the Imperials, they're all bad. No, it's just the people at the very top. Explain the meat farms. The meat farms are the Imperial meat farms, and he dismantles most of those. So if you're referring to things like the like servitor growing, servitors technically don't have souls, but in terms of like human beings being used as food, yeah, does not do that. Yeah, non-tech priests making machines and demon engines, I'm sure. Yeah, so straight up, the Mechanicus tries to assassinate Asphodel several times. They fail every time because he literally has his own set of bodyguards called the Death Watch, that not only have the equivalent of like Dark Eldar shadow generators, they're also all equipped with power swords. So they're like invisible and they have power swords. And they're really hard to kill. So he kind of made his own equivalent to Sakarans, but better. And not to mention the fact that he, in his, by the time that he dies, he's equipped himself with like a 15-foot tall set of power armor. He's in like massive armor. I have no idea if it's like supposed to say it's 15 feet tall or if it's like, yeah. What did they send after him? Well, several things. They have sent Imperial assassins after him at one point. I know that they sent several different guards regiments to try and kill him. But they also sent at least one Imperial assassin, probably an Eversor or a Vindicare, if I had to guess, and that individual failed. And then they have tried to kill him with Imperial Guard regiments, but they have also intentionally put out a bounty on his head to the Imperial Guard that they want to catch him either dead or alive. So during the campaign, they're constantly trying to go and attack him. The issue is that he has a massive cult with literally billions of people in it. So finding him, tying him down, and killing him is a little bit harder. Chaos start farming the worlds they take to give the Blood Pact new arms and organs and shit. Well, I don't know about organs. I don't have any evidence of that. Number one, you can clone organs without using human beings. You can just do that via a Vita womb. You can already do that. You don't need to hurt people. But you say farming arms like there aren't planets in the Imperium that produce and make weaponry. Like, if you control an Imperial industrial world, you're not just going to dismantle their economy and keep them from working because work is bad. No, if the planet produces arms, which most often they will, the Blood Pact will take weapons and equipment from them. So yeah, no, there's not any more exploitation under Nadzimbar, at least. Later on in the Crusade, where it's other individual magisters, you see people getting worked to death. And you see a lot more harsh situations as the Crusade starts to go on. Nadzibar's no longer in charge. Gower is in charge. Gower is more military than religiously minded. He changes the tone and the tenor of the Pact a lot. He also recruits a much wider net of individuals. So yeah, no, different thing, and yeah, you don't need to kill people to make organs. Well, I have no idea if they use tech assassins or not, but considering how many men he has around him, it's not likely. Yeah, I have not heard of that in reference to cutting off people's arms to attach to people. That wouldn't make a lot of sense because they do have access to augmetics, so I don't know why they would do that. Maybe there's an example of it, but I've never heard of it. Nadzibar let the Sister of Battle retire for just turning a little chitness, and surely he'd let aged veterans retire. Okay, yeah, so how do the Blood Pact get chosen, trained, and how do they quote-unquote retire? Number one, most of them are acolytes, which if you know about acolytes, they are the upper level of occults. They're more involved with the religious portion, and a lot of them are also immortal. Yeah, there's a reason why I didn't mention Arch's series in this. I don't agree with most of the things that he says. And I actually kind of stopped listening to his series. Again, nothing against that series. And really, again, I don't hate Arch, but I understand why some people do. He was just the person who ended up bringing me into the setting. But I gave it a shot with his stuff, but he started talking about Nadzibar, and I was just like, you are so wrong, and you're out of your depth here, and you haven't really thought about the situation that you're in, and since there's no lore for him to pull from, because again, Arch kind of gets into a consistent thing of reading the Lexicanum, exactly like I do, reading a couple of the books, sections from the books, but he looks at it from the Imperial side of view, which means that he regurgitates Imperial propaganda word for word without really interpreting it and breaking it down whatsoever. So that's one of the reasons why I stopped listening to his series. Again, I don't hate it. I think he breaks it down pretty well, but he goes by book instead of by era, and he also sees it entirely from the Imperial side, whereas I am more interested in approaching the entire campaign from the Chaos side through the lens of Nadzibar's decisions. So I hope that helps out. Biological replacement. Yeah, augmetics are literally better. Yeah, so vat-grown humanoids. Again, it's that question of soul, not soul, clone. If it is a clone, aka if you grow it out of a Vita womb and it's a clone and not a, egg and zygote. If it's not like a zygote with actual human genetics from two different humans, that does have a soul if it has the genetic material from two different humans. If it's a clone, it does not have a soul. So some servitors are legitimately just clones. Some servitors are not. So that's what makes the difference. Some of them do have souls, some of them do not, essentially. If you took a human being and turned them into a servitor, that has a soul. But if you just vat grew a servitor from cloned genetic material, which is a common thing that they do and can do, because essentially they have template servitors that they then clone that DNA, those don't have a soul, as we know from the Ephriel strain. Clones not having souls, etc. So, Tribly, sorry. Yeah, so how do they retire? So, the Blood Pact troops under Nadzibar are all raised from one of two things. They have to be experienced veteran men-at-arms that are captured in battle and are receptive to the terms of the Blood Pact. Essentially, if they go through the basic training of the Blood Pact, which is a brutal, soul-crushing, and often lethal process back on Gura, they are allowed to become a Pact Son. The only other way to become a Pact Son is to be the child of a Pact Son. So you need to be either a kid, a direct genetic descendant of another son of the Pact, or you need to be a veteran warrior who is captured and acceptant of Chaos theology and survives the boot camp of the Blood Pact, which is, again, in a desert on a feral world. Not a lot of people survive this process. It's a very, very small number of hard and scrappy individuals who end up surviving Nadzibar's selection process for who's going to become a Pact Son. In terms of retiring, again, some of them are immortal, some of them last a really long time. But in terms of retiring, we do see a couple of Pact Sons who are very, very old. But what would be more likely is that they just get cycled back to be planetary defense forces for either Gura, for, the home of the Blood Pact, for Nadzibar's homeworld on Gura, or they could be sent back to another important world that needs Pact Sons on it. We have individuals who are on armory or fortress worlds who are Pact Sons and they have served for a long time, but they're kind of a rear echelon force. Why are they there? Probably because that's their retirement. And since they may live to, be 200 years old, the hope is that by the time that this campaign or crusade is over, they'll be able to live in comfort on whatever world they choose now that the Empire of Chaos has expanded so far. So that's the aged veterans retiring. As far as a pension system goes, there is a public provision for soldiers, kind of like there was with medieval knights. The idea of the people who live on the planet where you exist, they should support you in some way. And if you're on active military service, then the logistics of the Blood Pact will take care of you as well, and they'll provide you with food and housing and shelter and all of that. So, I think that's all of the questions answered. Does anyone else have anything for me? Because I know that it's been a back and forth video. Does anyone want to head back and see any of this artwork? I'm just going to scroll through rather quick, because honestly, some of these are absolutely great. Yeah, you want to see some more art? So we've got some existing art here. Sorry, yeah. We're just going to go back for a bit, because I know some people showed up a little bit late to the stream. Which is fine. I scheduled it to last 2 hours anyway. Which is all good. We have some existing art, some classic stuff. Yeah, so it would be more like a logistics system as far as pension goes. I guess you could straight up retire. If you're wounded, I think there'd be some sort of welfare and pension, but you got to remember they're also conquering imperial worlds, and if somebody was so veteran or so wounded that they could no longer fight, they would probably just settle down on an imperial world and function within imperial society with a little bit of money or prestige to start their way off. So that would be more likely. What would happen if the Sabbath world survived to hook up with the Eye of Terror and Chaos Bands? That's a lot of space to cover. We'd have to go through the entirety of Segmentum Pacificus. And here's an interesting thing. One of the ancillary stories to Nadzibar's and to Urlach Gower's is actually Dante Emoth Wild. You gotta remember, Chaos is the best faction for humanity. We do not survive as a species if the Imperium wins. We all become slaves if the Imperium wins. Forever. No matter what. There's no escaping Imperial bureaucracy. There's no mobility within ideal imperial society. It's calcified. It's permanently static. There is no change in imperial society. There's no improvement. And there is certainly no utopia within the Imperium of Man. Chaos, on the other hand, at least the chaos that Nadzibar espouses, is utopia. It's mankind on top in reality, the kings alone on top in the warp. And that's his vision. That's his utopia. I'd stand by that 100%. What is... is that hell is better than Texas? Yeah. I mean, see, that's the thing. Is the warp hell? Didn't used to be. Didn't used to be hell. And of course, is it hell to those who see chaos as an ally, chaos as a support system, chaos as a primordial portion of your being? After all, what is the imperial soul but fuel for the gods? Why does the imperial soul that is supposedly so noble and blessed by your god emperor, why does it fly to the gods so quickly? Why does it serve the kings in the warp just as verily as mine? Good question. Maybe because they're made of the same thing? Maybe because that was what your soul was originally made for? Maybe because that primordial truth that we are all servants and brothers of the warp and of the kings. We are his serfs. We are his men-at-arms. We are his faithful servants and his faithful served in both measures. Yeah. Here's some existing art. Great stuff. We got NoCAD. We've got OG Inheritor Asphodel and revamped Inheritor Asphodel, which I love. I love both of these, honestly. I love the classic power armored Asphodel and the new armored Asphodel. Both very nice. Yeah. Anti-government folks. Yeah, Huron and Badab are sovereign citizens, 100%. I think Nadzibar would probably be like Christian perfectionists. At least, like, that's my best thing. He'd be like the city on a hill folks. Like the original Methodists and things like that, which, yeah, I can identify 100%. The Wesleyites and those folks. Maybe even like the Seneca community, maybe, to a degree. But that would be a bit of a stretch. But yeah, and then I guess Abaddon would be like rabid anarchists or communists, maybe. Yeah, probably anarchists. They're just anti-government everything. They just hate the Imperium because it's the Imperium. Oh, I don't think the Emperor should have joined Chaos. I think the Emperor is Chaos. He already is. You say that like he hasn't joined Chaos. Your god is a god, and that's the worst thing I could possibly say to a god Emperor worshipper. Remember, Nadzibar venerates the Emperor, you know, as a god. He sees the god Emperor the same way that the priests and the sisters do. Ah, yes. You want to talk about eternal, horrifying slavery with no chance of escape? Let's let the Admech win. What an absolute nightmare that would be. But yeah, pretending like the Emperor's not a god and then getting mad at me as a Chaos Worshipper for saying he is the god, yeah, that's a little bit hypocritical, isn't it? The only difference is he's deceiving you into thinking that he's the god that made you and the god you should worship, when in reality your primordial soul is drawn to the kings in the warp. It's not my fault, that's just reality. You're not living in it, because you've been deceived by your false god. Who is still a god, by the way. But yeah. The Mormons. See, I would say that's accurate, except his faith is older than the normal Chaos faith. So the Mormons come around and they change Christian ideals, and they have one leader that comes up with his own theory. Whereas in reality, Chaos humans are more traditionally like Nadzibar than they are like those in the Eye of Terror. So he's much older. It would be like early Christian sects. I guess you could call it like the Church of Jerusalem, as opposed to the traditional like Catholic Church, being more Abaddon's Chaos. Yeah. I don't think it would be awesome. I don't think if the Mechanicus win, that it would be awesome. I think it would be very, very exploitative and quite smelly and polluted. I don't think the Mechanicus care very much about pollution. Yeah. Well, see, here's the thing. You get drawn apart. You get drawn to be torn apart as playthings because you didn't believe. Very simple. You're used as fuel because you don't believe. No, I didn't say that the psychers who made the Emperor were wrong. I just think that maybe they should have had a little bit more forethought about where their power came from. After all, they didn't exist before Old Night. It was the power of the gods that made them, and yet they were wandering against them. That's rebellion in the most traditional sense, but of course, basically no one in 40k actually knows that, or anything about the Emperor's origins, so Nadzibar wouldn't really be able to speak on it. He doesn't even know that they exist, or that they made the Emperor. Outside of that, yeah, the Psychers who made the Emperor and the Emperor himself were wrong. They were trying to do something which is inherently impossible, because to separate humanity, a species that was inherently connected to the warp in a way that many other species are not, trying to remove them from their rightful, inherent, primeval rulers and the fabric of their existence, their souls, trying to do that is wrong. Inherently, it is incorrect, it is foul. But also, the idea that everyone is torn apart and used as playthings is not really correct. Remember, chaos worshippers that go to feed the gods are not treated the same way that those who resist them are. There's a difference in treatment, and there's a very big difference in how you live and how long you live. Remember, if you serve, you prolong. You continue to persist and exist in reality for as long as the gods desire you to do so. You could remain forever, eternal, immortal, unrelenting, a champion, and travel freely between the warp and reality. As Nadzibar did, he trekked into the warp himself. Chaos itself is not at all unnatural. Remember, the realm of souls was chaos long before it was really chaos. Oh yes, chaos now is entirely natural. It has changed, yes, but you have to remember, the entities that existed within the warp before the birth of Slaanesh were still there. They were not created artificially from the birthing. Outside of Slaanesh, the other gods were still there. They are as natural, as primordial, as primeval as reality itself. The warp may be a dark mirror of the realm of souls, but that does not mean that Khorne, Tzeentch, and Nurgle did not exist within it before the birth of Slaanesh. The only one that you could argue is slightly unnatural is Slaanesh herself, but of course, since both Slaanesh and the God Emperor became gods in the warp at a certain point, naturally, that means that more gods can be created, and that is a function of the universe as primordial and primeval as the human soul. I love this original art. Honestly, I was so close to just making this the icon for the channel. Kind of like the smug Nadzibar face. Peaceful does not mean without the gods, my friend. I think you're conflating the idea of peaceful and relatively harmonious for not dangerous and not containing the chaos gods. This is not true. The gods were there. They were effectively in stasis or in sleep, but the War of Heaven woke them back up. That does not mean that they were created by the War in Heaven outside of Slaanesh. The other gods were there because they are a primordial, inherent, and primeval function of the universe. They have always been there. They will always be there, no matter what. So, that's an inherent piece. Also, yeah, why would pollution matter if your goal is to seek understanding and knowledge? Facepalm. Pollution matters because in order to do those things, you need to have the ability to breathe. Breathing is important. Yep. Yeah. technically, yeah, the whole, like, Malal and the Emperor rising and falling, or Vashtor trying to become a god, that only leans more truth to the fact that creating the Chaos Gods like you did with Slaanesh is an inherent and natural part of the warp. So, totally natural. Absolutely primeval, and of course the human soul is part of that. We have that tiny piece of warp magic within us that is the soul, an actual entity within the 41st millennium. Yeah. Only real major downside I see having a third arm is getting used to the new body mass distribution. Yes! Yes! So, let's look at that actually real quick. Sorry, I want to go... Yeah, the line art one. So, Moritz did actually account for this, and I love it so much. Look, his side that has the mutated leg is the side with the two arms. So he actually has more power in this leg to help account for the increased body mass of the extra arms. So don't worry, that's been taken into account, and I love it a lot. Because I don't know, I love the dragon leg. The dragon leg and the dragon tail is so cool, because even though they're not described in the original art, God, that's so cool. So nice, so nice. I love it. This is great. This is such a cool image. I want to see. Is there a better one? Yeah. There's this one, which is like the same thing, just zoomed out a bit. So cool. Mutations wouldn't be so bad. Yeah. Sorry. I'm going ahead. Yeah, custom shirts. In his case, he just kind of bicep bursts out of his armor's arm protection. Why would you need to breathe if you don't have a mouth? Well, the main thing would be to aerate your blood and to allow you to continue functioning with your brain. I believe even the Mechanicus use this vital organ occasionally, perhaps in between smacking each other with toasters or other cybernetic enhancements. You do need oxygen to go to your brain, and without a mouth, it would be quite hard to breathe that thing. Or nose. You know, those two things both need to take in air. Yeah. A god of chaos can be made, and they can be unmade. Correct. True, technically. Again, we see that mostly with the Eldar gods. Again, did they exist within the warp? Kind of, yeah, pretty much. And also in reality. But being unmade, being devoured, or fading, it's indicative of kind of demons. But the thing is, because the big four are inherent to humanity, as long as humanity persists, which, by the way, the idea that the Tyranids will be able to wipe out all of humanity and then just chaos ceases to exist, this is wrong. And it's demonstrably false, because before humanity existed, the gods were. Before humanity existed, before humans had become a species, the gods were. Granted, they were inside of the warp and not really formed yet. They were kind of a thought form entity more than they were a actual organized demonic creature, but they existed. They did have an existence. So it would be doubtful that you could get rid of the original three, because they represent things that are inherent not just to humans, but also to the universe. Cycles, logic cycles, generation and creation, sorcery, power, ambition. These things are inherent to single-celled biological organisms, things that would escape the Tyranids even if they were just floating through space. Things that fuel Zeech, Khorne, and Nurgle cannot really be destroyed, because at the end of the day, they were around before most things were even living. So it'd be difficult to get rid of them. Slaanesh? Maybe, but it would be very, very difficult. You need to kill every single living human being and every single sentient Xenos race in order for Slaanesh to lose most of her followers. And then, of course, the other thing about removing the humans to remove the gods is there are humans in the warp. How are Tyranids going to get into the Eye of Terror and destroy whatever demon worlds have humans on them? Quite frankly, they can't. Or at least they would most likely die trying. Because Tyranid ships don't really enter the warp, and if they try and get near to something like the Eye of Terror, it would probably destroy them. Yeah, I often wonder about synthetic blood. Because synthetic hyperoxygenated blood would still probably have to have a source for that oxygen, gun tuna. And unless you want to have a small biosphere attached to your back so that you can produce an infinite amount of oxygen, you might want to rethink that whole using synthetic blood alone. So the Kabbalah was even more cringe than I thought. What do you mean the Kabbalah? You mean the Cabal? Yeah, the Cabal is massively cringe. It's why they don't exist anymore, or rather why people ignore them. Batches of emotions made manifest, hit a critical mass, and boom, a god. Yeah, you can't kill an emotion. Like, they will go back to their primordial kind of slumbering or stasis state, but the reason why they wake up with Slaanesh is essentially because, well, war. The things that they feed off of had suddenly become way more common, and it was time to wake up and devour the energy, the souls that was being given to them. And then, of course, humanity. The ones who give them the most food the most consistently, and thus their favored children. It's one of the reasons why theoretically you could have Eldar that fall to chaos and don't die instantly. It could happen. It's hard and definitely dangerous for the Eldar involved, but it can happen. It can happen. Technically possible. Especially with Dark Eldar. Like, I genuinely think Dark Eldar can fall to chaos, and as long as they had some chaotic protection from Slaanesh's influence, they could survive and worship and receive blessings and things like that. Use some radioactive smog is pretty cool. Let's see some... Yeah, that is true. They would see some radioactive smog is pretty cool, because they're absolutely batshit insane. Put the gods in a blender, remove the solidified foam, and bring them to a loose emotional state. Why don't you shake them up with ice and a whisk first so that you can produce some delicious chaos cocktails? That would be fun. Lovely, even. I think that's a great idea. Wallflower. Product of industry being a marvel and all that. I mean, it's certainly something to marvel at, I tell you what. No question about marvel. Old ones don't have to worry about Chaos Gods before the war in heaven? Well, because the Chaos Gods were essentially in stasis. There weren't enough living, sentient creatures yet dying and actively fighting each other, and there weren't enough interstellar species to actively wake them up. Also, you assume that the Old Ones even gave much of a crap about the Gods of Chaos. They don't necessarily do. Again, they're protected by the warp, and the protections of the warp and the thickness of the barrier meant that the realm of souls was a lot harder to get in and out of, and to get demons out of, than it used to be. So again, like, the idea of thousands of demons just showing up somewhere during the war in heaven, not really something that the Old Ones were worried about, because it wasn't something that happened all that much, or had really been known to the galaxy. No man more sane than a tech priest making machines. I really encourage you to look up Inheritor Asphodel, and more importantly, look up the Woe machines. Just to give you an idea of how messed up this guy is, he found a pair of orphans on a planet that he was leaving. And instead of doing something normal and nice, like giving them a place to live and a home — this is after Nadzabar is dead, by the way, so do not blame this on me. This is the Inheritor doing his own shit. He kidnapped the two children, and he implanted two large chaos demon engines into their bodies, feeding off of their souls. And then he gave them back to the Imperials, and a Imperial Guard sergeant adopted them after she had lost her own children on Vergast. And then he activated the two child demon engine sleeper cells and unleashed them upon the Imperial Guard garrison. He literally made pocket demon engines and shoved them into a bunch of children. This man needs to be stopped. That is some evil shit. He is 100% evil. Yeah, that is some fabulous bullshit. That man, he is made of 100% bad. There is, I think, one more person more evil than him, but it's just because he has a comically evil name. And interestingly enough, for our campaign, they're being played by the same person. His name is Pater Sin. His name is literally Sin. They're not babies. They're young children. They're not babies. They're young children. Because he puts relatively large demon engines into them. Like, these are 7 foot, 8 foot tall monsters of warp glass and metal that can produce a field of, like, distortion and darkness. Yeah. Yeah. So, again, Chaos is the best outlet, the best option for humanity. That doesn't mean that they are the good guys. Again, Nadzabar is a good guy. It's one of the reasons why I like him. He's genuinely just an actually genuine good person who wants to elevate humanity. Not everyone that he works with has the same opinion of human beings as being the best thing in the universe. It is some Alpha Legion and Night Lord shit. Yes, 100% it is. But yeah, Asphodel and Pater Sin are both absolutely comically evil. But both of them actually die in the Sabbath Worlds Crusade, so you can at least take some satisfaction that there is some justice for what happens to them. Yeah, technically it is a war crime. That is another thing. Child soldiers aren't really a thing that either the Blood Pact or any of their soldiers do, which kind of surprises me. It's like, you would assume child soldiers would be a thing at some point, but we just never see them. Might be because they have so many military-aged individuals to choose from, and then eventually Urlok Gower is going after anything that is military related, so he'll start recruiting like PDF troops or any yeah, again, Chaos as a whole versus individual Chaos people, very different argument. Very different argument. Also, Inheritor Asphodel is messed up in the head. He's like creative, yes, genius, yes, but also mad scientist, 100% mad scientist. He's got that like crazy build of being like, I am just as good as any tech priest, and also I have access to the warp and whatever evil shit I want to create. Confused about the inefficiency of the whole thing. The Admech would never. Oh yeah, aren't you the guys who make those little vat-grown babies to be cherubs in constant agony flying around priests? Aren't you those guys who make those? Doesn't the ecclesiarchy special order young children and babies from you so that they can make servitors? Hmm. Many such cases. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sure they're necessary. Sure. Don't you also give them melta bombs so that they can actually kill themselves? Yeah. Yeah. We are the good guys. I'm 100% on that. Chaos is the good guys. Y'all are evil. That is evil. It, not only efficient, but neat, too. Average tech priest response. Not only efficient, but cool. I love it. Thank you, Tuna. Thank you for exposing once more why this guy is better than the average tech priest, even though he did that heinous shit. Oh god, at least he gets punished for his crimes. Like there's that. But that's the other thing. Like all of that terrible stuff happens after Nadzibar dies, which shows you just how strong of an effect this wrinkly old bastard had on all of his fellow magisters. God, look at his nose. Look at that massive. It's like a woodpecker with his mustache and beard underneath it. Crazy. I love him. I love him. I love the helmet. I love the armor. I love all of it. It's so good. Moritz did such a damn good job, right? This is such a good piece of art. All of it. I cannot wait to show you guys the final colored version. And no, yeah, you have not seen the final version yet. These are just like the very start of the color phase, and kind of a uncolored version of the triptych. Oh, nobody saw that. Whoops. Yeah, so that's the Q&A. I'm gonna go for like one more minute. Are there any last minute questions for me before I get going? Again, we're gonna be off for a couple of days. This has been a long stream, and I also am merely a man. I am merely a man, and I have a lot of work to do this week, so I'm probably gonna be busy for at least the next 2 or 3 days. I'm hoping that I can do part 2 on this weekend, but it will likely be at a time that is better for our folks on the other side of the continent. So, with that said, if there are no other questions for the rest of you folks who are justifying using babies as flying bombs and calling me the bad guy, uh, I will I will say good night to the rest of you folks. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's been such a pleasure. There's so many of you now that I'm so happy we can have a nice filled up thing like this. Again, I'll post in what time and date the other things will be. We also have a great video thing coming up where you guys are going to help me make some stuff for the rest of the factions. We're going to go over the various groups of the Heresy and the Primarch's weaponry and stuff. So, without further ado, I wish you all a lovely good night.